honorable dignitaries on dais, eminent keynote speakers, distinguished guests, participants, research scholars, students, and all other invitees. A warm greetings to you on behalf of the Department of Language, Culture and Society. After the stimulating discussions, enriching exchanges of day one of this two-day international conference, we now gathered here again this morning with renewed enthusiasm and eagerness to embark upon the day two of this two-day international conference, Language, Literature and Technology.
Yesterday set a strong foundation marked by insightful paper presentation, meaningful scholarly interactions, and thought-provoking keynote addresses by Dr. Priyanka Tripathi and Dr. Emmanuel Kulu Jr. that expanded our academic horizons. Today promises to carry this momentum forward. With a carefully curated lineup of sessions, expert discussions, and research presentations, Day 2 invites us to engage deeper, reflect critically, and explore newer perspectives that resonate beyond disciplinary boundaries. On behalf of the Department of LCS, it is my privilege to extend a warm welcome to all of you once again. Your presence, participation, and intellectual contributions truly enrich the spirit and ensure the success of this conference.
With the same spirit, let us now enter into the third plenary session of this two-day international conference. This session invites us to reflect how language not only operates as a tool for communication, rather how it shapes the power, identity, and social relations. To formally introduce our keynote speaker for the day, I now invite Dr. Sulagna Muganti, Assistant Professor, Department of LCS, SRM IST, and to invite the keynote speaker to deliver the plenary session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nandini and Atulya. A very good morning to one and all. It's a great honor and privilege to welcome our distinguished speaker for this session, Dr. Jairaj John Shekhar, a senior academician, researcher, and educator whose career spans nearly 4 decades of excellence in higher education. Dr. John Shekhar brings with him 37 years of rich teaching experience with specialization in English language teaching and higher education. He has served in several key leadership roles, including Head of the Research Department of English, Dean of Academic Policies and Administration, Dean for Curriculum Development and Research, and NAC Coordinator at the American College, Madurai. A prolific scholar, Dr. Shekhar has published over 120 research articles in national and international journals and has presented more than 130 research papers at conferences across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, including Oxford University. Being a remarkable academic mentor, he has also served as a doctoral committee member and reviewer for several prestigious universities and journals across the country. His contributions as an editor and reviewer extend to journals indexed by Elsevier and Web of Science, reflecting his standing in the global academic community. Dr. Shekhar is also an accomplished author. He has published 23 books, including widely used textbooks on English communication, research methodology, academic writing, linguistics, and literary theory, one of which is prescribed by Madurai Kamaraj University. With numerous awards for research excellence and hundreds of invited lectures to his credit, Dr. John Shekhar stands as a rare blend of teacher, researcher, mentor, and academic leader. We are deeply honored, sir, to have you with us today. So he will be speaking on the topic Sociolinguistics of Narrative, Language, Power, and Identity. We warmly invite you, sir, to share your valuable insights with us. Thank you. Please, sir.
Someone operate it. Can ask someone No, I can stand and walk. Yeah. Uh, Respected university authorities, Head of the Department of Language, Culture and Society, Dr. Kavitha Nair, Dr. Alayasan, convener of this conference, Dr. Sumadi and Professor Edison, co-conveners of this conference, fellow plenary speaker, Dr. Anita Devi Pillai from NIE Singapore, faculty members, online, offline, participants, online, offline, student friends. A pleasant morning to all of you. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Alayasan and Dr. Sumadi, Dr. Horizon for extending this invitation to come back to this university again. Before pandemic, I came here 2-3 times, and I'm really happy being here today to deliver a plenary talk. In fact, it is a pleasure and an honor to deliver this plenary at an international conference titled Practicing Narrative Engagement, Intersecting Language, Literature and Technology. The theme of the conference itself signals a shift, a critical and crucial shift from treating narratives. You all know what are narrative. Yesterday would have had this concept explained to you. So this theme of this today international conference signals a crucial shift from treating narratives as object of analysis, maybe a film or maybe a literary text, maybe a autobiography, maybe history, maybe a folklore. So the shift is from treating it as an object of analysis, as we usually do in our classrooms, research, for our articles, to understanding them as practices of engagement, not just mere object of for analysis, but as practices of engagement that are embedded in social life, power relations and technological mediation. My plenary today is titled Social Linguistics of Narratives, Language, Power and Identity. Social Linguistics of Narrative. I focus on 3 aspects of this. One is language, the other one is power, and the third one is identity. And at its heart is a simple proposition, and it is also something unsettling proposition. And we can also convert into a question this proposition. Proposition is this. Narratives are never just stories. We cannot mistake, as conveniently we do very often. Narratives are not just stories. Okay. And what are narratives? Narratives are ways of organizing language, the way we organize the language, the way we organize power, the way we organize identity in this world, the social world. Okay. And if you convert this proposition into a question, perhaps a question like this: what happens when we stop treating narratives as merely stories? If you don't treat narratives as merely stories, what happens? And what will happen if we start considering them as sites? Narratives are sites where language negotiates power and constructs identities. What will happen? Okay, so I will structure my plenary talk around 7 interconnected, interrelated movements, gradually moving from theory to practice and analysis to action. before I start, same slide. Yeah. Before I start my plenary, I would like to familiarize you with 7 axiomatic statements. Usually, literature people, we avoid axioms. We think that that is meant for mathematics people. But I do believe that when you write an article on literature, you need to have some kind of axiomatic statement because the axiomatic, I have given you 7 axiomatic statements here. These statements give a spine to my plenary because I believe that these axiomatic statements organize a complexity. Complexity, the ideas that we are going to deal with are so complex that they require kind of a shape and structure, and they also signal kind of intellectual leadership. And finally, they turn analysis into intervention. The first one is narratives are not neutral representations. Very often, traditionally, we believe and we also teach to our students in literature classes that literature is a representation. Maybe an idea that we took from Plato, what he says, mimesis. But my axiomatic statement is that narratives are not neutral representations, but they are social actions. What I mean is that narratives do not merely tell stories. They don't merely describe events. They are actively organizing meaning. Narratives are organizing meaning, and they assign responsibility, and they also shape social reality. So every story performs work. Okay, there is some work performed by every story or every narrative. What is the work that it is performing? You imagine you can take any text that you are familiar with. Narrative is performing a work like normalizing certain values, projecting certain values as if they are very normal, or they are legitimizing particular viewpoints, or contesting dominant interpretations and ideologies. To tell a story is therefore to intervene in the social world, literary world, but this purpose of this literary world is to intervene in our world in which we live. This is social world. So the purpose of telling story is to intervene in the social world, not simply to mirror it. Very often we think that literature is a mirror of life. We have taken from Shakespeare. All those things have been contested for the past 100 years because of literary theory. So literature is no longer viewed as a mirror holding up to nature quoted from Shakespeare. Number 2, language does not merely tell stories. Okay, because then what does it do? It doesn't. If narratives don't tell us stories, then what else do they do? A narrative authorizes or denies voice. I think Dr. Anita is going to focus on voice. Not all languages, not all dialects, because a language is not a monolithic entity. When we speak a language, we all speak a dialect only. Nobody speaks language. Everybody speaks a particular dialect. So, not all languages, not all dialects, not all speech forms are treated equally. In Tamil, we are privileging Senthamil over all other types of things. Not all of us, when you think of a Pattimandram, immediately we think of Salomon Papaya. Not all of us are capable of speaking like Salomon Papaya, but somehow we are sanctifying the Tamil used by Professor Salomon Papaya. We think that that is a standard Tamil. Anything that falls short of that type of Tamil is not treated well. So there are linguistic hierarchies. Okay, these hierarchies determine whose stories are heard credible, okay, and articulate or worthy of attention. So language functions as gatekeeping mechanism by enabling some voices while marginalizing other voices. That's what I mean by the second axiomatic statement. And third one, power operates not only through what is said, but through who is allowed to speak. Okay, so power is exercised as much through exclusion as through expression. Certain things are expressed, certain things are excluded. Silencing is a very powerful mode of communication, but that is excluded. So silencing, interruption, delegitimization, selective listening shape narrative fields as strongly as overt statements. Understanding narrative power requires attention to access, authority, and institutional recognition. And we are going to see it in detail shortly. Fourth one is identity is not expressed in narrative. When you read a narrative, identity is not expressed there, but it is produced through narrative. In the course of time, narratives produce identity. Meaning is narratives do not simply reveal a pre-existing self. Identity is not there already, and narratives are not expressing them. But only through the act of a narration, identity is revealed, or narratives construct and negotiate identity over time. Through storytelling, individuals position themselves. Storyteller positions himself or herself, and storyteller positions the readers also, okay, in relation to others, revise their past selves, and imagine their future possibilities. And therefore, identity emerges as a discursive and relational achievement. And number 5 is literature is not only imaginative. Very often we say that literature is an imaginative product. But my proposition is that literature is not only imaginative, but also archival and also political. Literature is never, or narratives are never apolitical. In one way or other, all narratives are political. That is my next proposition, because literary texts preserve voices, they preserve languages, they preserve dialects, they preserve experiences, often excluded from official histories. What you find in narratives are not found in official histories. Okay, by recording marginalized speech and alternative narratives, literature functions as an archive of social struggle which is denied in official histories. In doing so, it also intervenes politically in debates about memory or legitimacy or representation. And number 6, last but one, is technology does not democratize narratives by default. It has become a fashion these days, even for literature departments, to overemphasize the role played by technology. It was done by language people, but now we are talking about literature people also talking about technology. Yesterday, an article of mine was published in a peer-reviewed journal. I got the email. The article is against technological determinism, because technology has got very minimal role to play in human institutions like language or culture or literature. So that is my argument in that particular article. Digital platforms expand opportunities, there is no doubt about it, for storytelling, but also introduce new forms of control. Technology has introduced new forms of control through algorithms, surveillance, and platform economies. Some narratives are amplified while others are buried. Others are rendered invisible by technology. Technological mediation, therefore, reshapes narrative power rather than eliminating inequality. The last proposition is something that is directly related to the theme of our conference, is practicing narrative engagement is an ethical responsibility. It's not simply a scholarly method of analysis that we do it conveniently for our own material benefits like teaching, doing research, writing an articles, because practicing narrative engagement signals a kind of ethical responsibility. Responsibility towards storytellers, towards the audiences, towards the communities. Each narrative engagement requires attentive listening, which is absent in most of our academic contexts or within academia. Reflexivity and accountability, particularly when working with vulnerable and marginalized voices. Scholarship, pedagogy, and public discourse must therefore, I believe, move from analysis that is happening in classes within academia toward care and action. Now I come to, as I promised at the beginning, that there are 7 interrelated movements through which I want you to journey through my plenary. Number one, why social linguistics of narratives? I'm not going into the nitty-gritty of what is narrative, what is social linguistics, because I don't want to question the wisdom of the collective wisdom of the audience here. You know what is social linguistics and what is a narrative. In the course of time, you will understand. So first, I would like to frame the concept, why social linguistics of a narrative that I have chosen or I proposed, and then organizer chose that particular theme. As I told you, narratives are not merely told, stories are told in language. Okay, so though our students conveniently pulverize each narrative into some kind of paraphrase into some kind of stories. Okay, but my idea is that narratives are not merely stories are told in language by creative writers. I look at narratives as social actions. We are living at a time when literature is devalued, humanities are devalued, because they want to assess the relevance of humanities and literature on par with material sciences. So they are asking what is the use of literary programs in this materialistic world. So in this context, I would like you to look at narratives not as stories told in languages, but as social actions performed through language. Each narrative is action. What action? Not individual action. It is a social action performed through a language. And this performance takes place in a specific cultural and political and sometimes technological context. From social linguistic perspective, okay, narratives become sites where power relations are enacted, identities are negotiated, and social realities are legitimized or contested. Traditionally, narratives have been studied, of course, within literature, within folklore, within history, sometimes psychology. Social linguistics brings a crucial intervention by reminding all of us that narratives are always told in social context. No story if there is no social context. When you read Shakespearean narrative, you have to place that narrative in Shakespearean social context. But we have been taught to treat literature, particularly English literature, as universally applicable. You cannot read a narrative without a social context, because the stories are told through language in a particular social context by socially located speakers. Great canonical writers like Shakespeare are socially located. You should know who Shakespeare is before reading what he has written. Okay, so this reader response theory or new criticism, these things you have to take with a pinch of salt. You have to know who has written this story. That's why now you are talking about feminist approaches to literature. You are dealing with the marginalized voices. Who has written what? Who is addressed in this particular, who addresses and who is addressed in this particular narrative. So by socially located speakers through socially valued or devalued languages. Languages which are valued or languages which are devalued. Both things are possible. Okay. Social linguistics of narratives studies how storytelling practices are shaped by social structures. Social structures, I mean class, caste, gender, race, nation. Number two, institutional discourses. How we talk about the narratives, maybe within institutional discourse like education, law, media, politics, and evolving communicative technologies also like digital media, artificial intelligence, social platform. After the advent of AI, we have totally forget about NI. Natural intelligence is there, but we are not taking NI seriously as we are taking AI. Okay, so from social linguistic perspective, narratives are not neutral. Narratives are not neutral. Each person, each storyteller, each writer, each biographer, each autobiographer, each of these the person, when they tell a story, these stories are not neutral. And from social linguistic perspective, language is never innocent. You can't take language for granted. You have to stop and then you could look at language, how language has been manipulated by the storyteller. And narratives are deeply ideological. When you say narratives are not neutral, in other words, narratives are deeply ideological. So when you read a narrative, first question that you must ask is, what ideology is this writer trying to manufacture and sell to the? No, you cannot accept world views of all the writers, because each writer has got hundreds of ideologies to convey in their text. So narratives are deeply ideological and relational, and storytelling is always shaped by who speaks, who listens, who decides what counts as a legitimate story. Thus, social linguistics, if you look at the social linguists like William Labov, William Labov on narrative structure shows us how everyday storytelling follows certain patterns. But later, scholars like Bourdieu or Mikhail Bakhtin extended this kind of insight to show how narratives circulate within the fields of power. That's why social linguistics cannot be studied, or social linguistics of anything cannot be studied without making references to power. Okay. So my first key argument is it given there? Yeah. My first key argument, I am making 7 arguments. My first key argument is that narratives cannot be separated from social conditions in which they are produced. Narratives are produced in social conditions, and you cannot divorce a text from a narrative from social context. I gave you 2 literary examples. One is now, we are familiar with both the writers. First one is Mulkraj Anand, and is a famous text, I think all of you must be familiar with, is Untouchable. Untouchable centers on Baka, whose story unfolds through a mix of English narration and a lot of translated English speech. Okay, the novel exposes how linguistic address itself is caste marked. Baka is shouted at, Baka is abused, Baka is silenced only through language. Okay, so the narrative demonstrates that social linguistic inequality precedes and structures narrative possibility. Second example that I want your attention to is that Tiongos initiative. I think you must be familiar with his canonical text, Decolonizing the Mind. Of course, it's a non-fictional work, but Decolonize the Mind, the narrative in that particular non-fictional book reveals how language choice determines narrative legitimacy. Writing in English versus Gikuyu, an African language, is not just stylistic but political, because he wants to show why narratives must be studied sociolinguistically rather than purely literarily. Okay. Now I move on to the second interrelated movement, that language and narrative as a social practices. First one, narratives are produced in social context. Second one, language and narrative as social practice. Social linguistics moves us away from seeing language as a closed system. It's not just grammar. Social linguistics does not treat language as a matter of grammar. Unfortunately, most of the technological institutions, before we came here, we were discussing how we are forced to teach a certain language courses where we are teaching a lot of grammar. But grammar doesn't matter. Okay, even now, Indian English grammar is something qualitatively different from the grammar that Shakespeare used or native speakers are using. That doesn't matter. From their point of view, Indian English speakers are using, or Asians are using, different kinds of grammar, but still communication takes place. So social linguistics moves us away from seeing language as a closed system. And one of the most important contributions of social linguistics is the idea that language is a social resource, okay, and not just a grammatical system. And therefore, narratives, from this point of view, you can understand, narratives reflect who gets to speak, in which language, in which variety, to whom, and under what conditions. When people tell stories, whether orally or in writing or digitally, they draw upon dialects. As I told you that writers and speakers and readers, we all use our own dialects. When we draw on, these writers draw upon dialects or registers or genres or silences or code switching, in the case of multilingual society like India, and culturally embedded norms. These choices are never coming accidentally to the writers. For example, a life narrative told in a regional language like Tamil rather than a global language like English, is always often read as local. Oh, Tamil narrative is a local, and it is limited compared to a narrative rendered in English. Non-standard grammar. You remember when Nissim Ezekiel used to write poetry in 1960s. Nissim Ezekiel is making fun of kind of Indian English, particularly present tense form, overuse of present tense form. There are a number of poems, there he is mocking at the kind of, But now after 1992, when India became a recognizable economy in the world, a competitive economy, now we have kind of a gethu. When we speak Indian English, no longer. Now Kiran Desai is not giving any annotation, any footnotes to the Hindi words that she is using in her work as her mother used to do. When Anita Desai, at the foot of each page of the novel, all Indian words were annotated, because these Indian writers are primarily writing for the Western audience, not for the Indian audience. So they were apologetic about using Indian words or Indian way of using English. But now it is not like that. We have become more assertive. This is how Indians will use English. And if you don't know, learn English. Which English? Indian English. Then you start reading Indian writing. So we have started challenging the Western readers. So we are using grammar, maybe non-standard grammar, but this non-standard grammar use is frequently interpreted as lack of competence. You don't know grammar, that's why you are speaking like that. When Indians or Asians say we are discussing about, and native speakers are raising these eyebrows, why are you discussing about? Because verb discuss cannot take the preposition about, but we do take. When Indians speak, when Asians, when I went to Hong Kong for a conference, there also is people they are using discussing about only. So Asians are discussing about, because in Tamil, onna patti dhaan pesittu irundha. Onna patti, how can I leave patti? Patti comes always with us. We are discussing about this film. We are discussing about this English teacher. We cannot say we are discussing English teacher, because we think that there is something deficient in that kind of expression. So what is seen as a deficient by native speakers is validated by the non-native speakers. When you say pre-independence or post-independence, why can't I say prepone? Postpone, prepone. Indian English is more logical. These English speakers are less logical. They have no IQ. We are perfecting your imperfect English. That seems to be the mood of Indian users of English. Okay, so we have our own set of Indian English has evolved. 20 years ago, Oxford Dictionary had an appendix of a list of words used in Indian English. So it has got now world recognition. Friends, I tell you, in the very near future, Indian English will become global English. We don't have to be worried about a global English. Throughout the globe, I hope that Indian English will become very popular, because in all the continents, in all the countries, Indian IT professionals have already settled down. They have taken their spouses, they have their own kids, and they are speaking Indian English only. Mom, I love you. Who? Native speakers say. But our Indian kids, being raised up in London, they say that I am loving you. And these Indian kids sitting along with the native kids in schools, and those kids, they start learning Indian English. When the native kid goes back home and then says, Mom, I am loving you, mom is nonplussed. Why does my daughter say, I am loving you? No, you should not say, I am loving you. Say, I love you. But still, where did these native children get this kind of expression? From us only. Like AIDS, Indian English spreading all over the world. You cannot avoid Indian English. As long as Indians continue to settle around the world, I hope that Indian English will soon become world English. Okay, so non-standard grammar is frequently interpreted as lack of competence. You have no competence in English, and that's why you are using this kind of expression, they say. But then we say that it is a marker of lived experience. I told you, this is how we speak, this is how we think. Okay, this is how this English, this is how this language helps me think about these experiences. And silences in narratives, especially among women, Dalits, indigenous peoples, or refugees, these silences in narratives are often misread, even though it may signal trauma. If a character is maintaining silence, It cannot be mistaken for incompetence in communication, because silence is a more powerful form of communication, and it signals a trauma, a resistance, and strategic withholding. Moreover, social linguistics teaches us to read narratives against what is called deficit models of language. Certain languages have deficit. Certain language is not worthy of communication in science and technology. One of the reasons why we continue to foreground English over Indian languages in India is that we think that Indian languages cannot be used in the field of science and technology. English alone, no. We ourselves have been made to think colonially. We are not able to decolonize our mind. Why can't, no, when Indian languages like Sanskrit, other classical languages can be used for reflection, philosophical reflection, why can't they be used for science and technology? We can. Annamalai, and there are so many scientists, they say that they think in English and then they are working in in frontier areas of science and technology. Okay, so the social linguistics teaches us to read against this proposition called deficit models of language. Instead, social linguistics help us to recognize linguistic diversity as epistemic richness. Linguistic diversity is epistemic diversity. Okay, so many languages. But Europeans think that one nation, one language. If a nation has got more than one language, it is not a nation. It amounts to pandemonium. So that idea is being marketed throughout the world. Now, Union government in India is also thinking of one nation, one language, one nation, one ration card, one nation, one subscription, journals. So one nation, one election, something like that. It's all European model. But India is a country with 1,652 languages. These Europeans are not able to imagine India as a country, because if I am from India, what's your mother tongue? They think that they expect me to say I speak Indian. But we speak all languages except a language called Indian, because there is no language. When we say Indian, we think of only the film, not language. Okay, so if you can't understand India with the multiple languages like 1,552 languages, that is this is your problem, because you have been born and raised up in a monolingual countries. This is one of the reasons why all ELT methods have become a perfect failures in Indian context, because all ELT theories are manufactured in monolingual context and exported to India and other Asian countries. And we also believe, ELT scholars, we pretend as if all these Western theories are working very well in India. Not only Katrangalattur, outskirts of, even a small place like Usalambatti, they think that these theories are working well. When those theory makers themselves suspect, how can our theories work well in Indian villages? These people are saying, what kind of theories? Now we are talking about literary theories. All these theories are also European centric, and we teach, we confuse ourselves, we confuse the students, and finally we say that all literary theories work well. All our articles, we support our articles with some theory or other, though most of us don't understand those theories. We talk about Derrida. We are not even able to pronounce certain European names. When somebody says Derrida, suppose I go to my MA class, today I am going to introduce Derrida. Most of the students think that Sarida Vada, what you are talking about. Because when I say today I am going to discuss Kanthasamy, the people become alert. But when I talk about some name I am not even able to pronounce, but that becomes a sign of scholarship. When you talk about concepts, when you pronounce the words which are unpronounceable for the Indian tongue, it becomes it becomes a marker of sophistication. Okay, so different ways of knowing. When I say that the linguistic diversity must be viewed as epistemic diversity, this is different ways of knowing, different ways of narrating the world, because languages help us. So narrative forms like oral histories, life writing, digital storytelling, literary fiction, or testimony, they're all shaped by speech communities or norms of legitimacy, power hierarchies. For example, a Dalit autobiography or indigenous oral narrative or a refugee testimony, whatever you are familiar with, challenges dominant linguistic and narrative forms. Okay, therefore my key argument, second key argument is, Language in literary narratives functions as social action rather than neutral description. I draw your attention to a couple of texts. First, let me take Arundhati Roy. Arundhati Roy is the god of small things. Foreground, I think that you would have read this novel. It's more than 20 years now since it was published. That novel foregrounds non-standard English. It is not written in British English or American English. She has purposely chosen non-standard English, child language, repetition, and syntactic disruption, because these narratives perform social critique. What is that? Broken language mirrors broken social relations. Broken language mirrors broken social relations, and these broken social relations are shaped by caste, very peculiar to our country, gender, and colonial residues. And the another text that I would like to refer to is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Hurston, an African American vernacular writer, and he has written in vernacular English, and this is dominant literary forms. This is how a sonnet should be written. This is how a lyric must be written. This is how a drama must be written. This is the dominant literary norms. And the protagonist in this narrative, Jani's voice gains authority through speech and demonstrate language as a practice of social positioning, not merely expression. Now let me move on to the third interrelated move, narrative and power. Okay, narrative is because I would like to turn to the question of power, which is central, as I told you, to social linguistic understanding of narrative. Power operates in narratives in, at least in my understanding, three interrelated ways. Power operates within narratives. Number one, power over narrative production. Okay, control over narrative production. Institutions like states, governments, media, academia like SRM University, publishing industries, even algorithms that we have created, decide which narratives should be preserved, which narratives must be archived. Algorithms are written in such a way that certain narratives are preserved or archived, and which are circulated, and which are marginalized, which must be dismissed, which must be erased as personal, emotional, or unreliable. Okay, and dominant narratives often present themselves as objective. Think of a dominant narrative like first Prime Minister of India, his work, Discovery of India. Now, we have to ask, whose discovery? Nehru may be our mama. I mean, that is how history has been created and circulated. When we were kids, Nehru is projected as our uncle. Maternal uncle, paternal uncle, I don't know, mama. Okay, so when he has written Discovery of India, we have to ask the question, who's India? Who discovered it? Nehru is not equal to John Sager. Nehru is not equal to the people who have assembled in this auditorium. Okay, so dominant narratives often present themselves as objective, history, natural, universal, whereas subaltern or marginalized narratives are labeled as subjective, emotional, and anecdotal. What Bama has written, we cannot take it as a narrative. Can she write like Virginia Woolf? So our standards are English writer, English female writers, and we are simply dismissing. We simply dismiss it. And originally it was written in Tamil only, no? For a wider audience, they have translated it into English. That too, she waited for Lakshmi Armstrong to say how our mind works, the colonial bent of mind. And number two, discursive power within narrative language. Power works as agent at the level of discourse. Because who is framed as agent? Who is framed as a victim? Who is named? Who remains unnamed? When you have Macbeth, that fellow is named Macbeth, his wife is Lady Macbeth. There is no name for her. Either pair Saroja, Sarah, some English name. Doesn't she deserve a name? Why should Shakespeare write Mrs. Macbeth as a Lady Macbeth, as if she doesn't have a name? So who are named and who remain unnamed. Which metaphors naturalize inequality? We are using certain metaphors which naturalize inequality. Okay, even pronouns draw boundaries, us versus them. Okay, and pronouns, metaphors, and framing devices shape blame and responsibility, victimhood and agency, and inclusion and exclusion. And third one is third interrelated level at which power operates is through narrative circulation. Some narratives travel globally. Some narratives means narratives written in some languages. If it is written in English, those narratives travel globally. And others remain unheard. One of my PhD scholars, she successfully completed long ago from Kerala. During our monthly meeting, when we were having a discussion with other fellow scholars, another scholar of mine was doing a comparative study of Vairamuthu and Chetan Bhagat. This Malayali scholar asked, "Who is Vairamuthu?" She is from Palakkad, very near, some 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers from Coimbatore or Pollachi. But she asked, "Who is Vairamuthu?" Vairamuthu is not known 40 kilometers from Tamil Nadu border, because Vairamuthu has writing in Tamil. Even Tamil people, Tamil தானே, வைரமுத்து இங்கிலீஷில் மட்டும் எழுந்தாரு வைங்களேன், வந்து நான் மட்டும் இங்கிலீஷ் எழுந்தானே எங்கேயோ போயிருப்பேன் நான் வந்து. See how we have a self-pity. We delegitimize our own language. Sometimes, the post-colonial hangover. Sometimes, many of us think that we should not have born in Tamil Nadu. Yeah, Vidhi, I was born in Madurai. I should have been born in Manhattan. I should have been Oklahoma University. Yeah, Didi SRM Institute. We tend to think very poor of ourselves, our culture. After NEP 2020, now everybody is taking very seriously IKS, Indian Knowledge System. And we literature people are looking for IKS in Shakespeare also now. Somehow now we are not able to leave out Shakespeare. The burden of Shakespeare is on our shoulders. So, friends, narrative engagement is always a political act, whether acknowledged or not. Narrative becomes tools of legitimation of power or against power. And therefore, my third key argument is narrative power lies in determining which stories are authorized as knowledge. Not all stories constitute knowledge. Some stories constitute knowledge. But who to decide that? I draw your attention to two writers, Magaswara Devi's narrative in Draupadi. I think a short narrative which challenges state power by refusing linguistic submission. Her final act, standing silent yet exposed, okay, very firmly, subverts the state's narrative of control. Silence itself becomes a counter discourse in her work. And Saadat Hasan Manto, a Pakistani writer, very famous in 1930s and 40s, one of his short stories, Doba Dek Singh, exposes how official political narratives erase individual experience. The protagonist Bhishan Singh's incoherent language disrupts rational state discourse and reveals madness as critique of power. Now let me move on to the fourth one, is narrative and identity. So from power, now we switch over to identity. Social linguistics reminds us that identity is not something that we possess. Your identity, my identity, our identity. Identity is not something that we possess. Then what is it? Identity is something that we perform. How do you perform? We perform through language. That's how power and language, identity language, they come together. Narratives are one of the primary ways that we do it. Through narratives, as I told you, speakers position themselves and position others. Protagonist or a narrator in a particular narrative not only position themselves but also position the readers. Okay, they negotiate a belonging, they revise their past selves, and they also imagine future identities. Life narratives, autobiographies, testimonies, even everyday anecdotes reveal identity as a fluid. We are living in a postmodernist, post-structuralist world where identity is not fixed. Identity is a fluid. Identity is relational. In relation to something else, he is a Pikali. He is a very nice fellow. He is a good fellow. He is an evil fellow. Only in relation to other, no, we can decide. There is nothing fixed, nothing called standard. Okay, and identity is also something that context dependent. Context dependent. Okay, when you are having theta, your spouse, husband or wife, your identity is different. When you have to come to classroom and you have a discourse with your students, student-teacher relation, there your identity is something different. Some people out after 6 o'clock, that identity is different. So identity is not something fixed. Identity is something fluid, something relational, something context dependent. Narratives construct identities. Narrative do not mirror identities. They are constructing identities in the course of narration. These identities across gender, caste, ethnicity, religion, nation, sometimes generation. Gen Z guys are thinking very differently. And digital selves also. We are talking about digital immigrants, digital natives. Okay, so sometimes, people who are above 60, they are digital outsiders. They are not likely to become digital immigrants, leave alone becoming or being digital natives. Okay, for multilingual speakers, native identity is hybrid, like people like us. Our identity is a hybrid because we are all part and parcel of multilingualism, multilingual society, and therefore multicultural. Okay, so our identity is shaped by migration. You would have been born in a small village in South Tamil Nadu, but you migrated to Chennai and you start speaking like a Chennai Vasi, but you are not part of Chennai. So migration has shaped your identity. Colonial histories, caste and class mobility, and digital transformation. Therefore, friends, narratives become acts of self-authorization. We authorize ourselves. We don't wait for someone else to authorize us, especially for those whose identities have historically been silenced or misrepresented. Okay. So my key argument is fourth key argument is literary narratives show identity as performed, identity as negotiated, identity as revised through storytelling. Okay, and I would like to give two literary examples to substantiate my key argument. One is Urdu novelist Ismat Chautai's Lighaf, translated as The Quilt, a short story which shows how gender and sexual identity emerge not through any self-declaration, but through narrative hesitation, through indirection, through silence. The character is revealing her personality. Identity emerges not through declaration. You don't say I am this, I am that. Not through declaration, but through narrative gaps. In other words, when I say narrative gaps, identity is negotiated in what cannot be said. So don't look for identity in what is said. What cannot be said, you have to look for identity. Now, second example is Bama's autobiographical narrative, Karukku, I think most of you are familiar with. Now, this narrative shifts between Tamil registers in order to assert Dalit Christian identity. Code switching becomes an act of self-authorization. Native speakers, Americans and British people don't indulge in code switching because they are cursed to be monolingual speakers. We are all blessed as multilingual speakers. Effortlessly, we move from one language to another language. We ourselves do not know when and where we'll seek the resources from which language, because many languages live together in our mind. Now, what is now called translanguaging. Okay, so another form of code switching. And therefore, the fifth one is literary narratives as social linguistic archives. As I told you, literature functions as social linguistic archives in the sense that recording voices or dialects or speech forms that I told you, official histories, official records, official documents erased. You have to go to literature to say what was erased, what was delegitimized. Literary narratives function as archives of social linguistic struggle. Dialects, fragmented voices, polyphony, experimental forms. When you read Bama's Karku, there are so many ketavarte, bad words. We say that, are you a woman? How can you a woman use such bad words? As if men are privileged to use such words. As if people from upper caste, no, they won't use such words. Only lower caste people will be using such words, no. The kind of stereotypes that we are creating in a caste-ridden society, no. So this choice of dialects and registers, voices, experimental forms, not merely aesthetic choices, they are all interventions into linguistic hierarchies. Literature serves as a rich archive of social linguistic practices. When novels or plays or poems foreground oral tradition, non-standard speech, or marginalized voices, they challenge dominant ideas about correctness. What is correct? What is incorrect? Refinement or literary value. Now we think very poor of certain Indian writers saying that Chetan Bhagat cannot be categorized as a literary writer. He cannot be a canonical writer. This writer, young adult fiction writers, they are not. They don't have literary value. So you have a norm, a standard against which you are trying to measure everyone. Okay, that's very wrong. And so in this sense, literature does not simply reflect a society. When you read literature, the old definition of literature acting as a reflection of society is not acceptable in contemporary society because it reconfigures. It reconfigures narrative authority. Okay, literary narratives intervene in social linguistic debates about voice, authority, and interpretation. Therefore, my fifth key argument is literature is a record of linguistic struggle which you don't find in official records. I give you two examples. When you go home, you can reread what you already read. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Okay, it's a canonical text. Achebe's integration of Igbo proverbs, oral forms into English fiction preserves indigenous narrative structures, okay, and resists colonial linguistic erasure. This is how we speak, this is how we think, but why should I write as if I am not an Indian? I am an Indian, I speak English only as Indian. Why should I pretend as if I should speak only British English? What is called standard, what is called received pronunciation, Daniel Jones pronunciation, but my mouth is Indian mouth. My tongue is Indian tongue. My English gives me my identity. Why should I be ashamed of speaking English as Indian? Why should I imitate native speakers? Native speakers speak English like that because they are condemned to speak like that. Whereas I have learned my mother tongue long before I started learning English. So when I start learning second, third, fourth, now your department has got foreign languages also, no? So when they start learning, students or scholars learn more languages, you cannot but your learning of additional languages will always be influenced by your mother, that is mother tongue. Another article that has been accepted will be published next month, I believe. My purpose in that article is that a language is dead. This is my single axiomatic statement. A language is dead if it is not spoken by women. If women don't speak a language, that language will die. Good example I have quoted there is Sanskrit. Sanskrit is dead because it is not used by women. Women are denied of using Sanskrit. When women start using Sanskrit to scold children, to love children, to give instruction to children, this affective domain is very, very important. Then the children will start. That's why it's a mother tongue. We pick up language only from our mothers. But Sanskrit is a patriarchal language. It is used by only male. That's why it's dead. As long as a language is used by menfolk, it will be a dead language. We use Sanskrit to recite slogas in the temple. That is to be done only by male priests, not female priests. Female priests attached to Pandikovil are not supposed to use Sanskrit. Because the family deity Pandi or Karpai or Mariamma cannot understand Sanskrit. Because it's a Deva Bhasha, only, even among gods, no, we have a caste system. Even among the gods, no, we have subaltern gods and you have mainstream gods. Okay, so the The next text that I would like to, Igbo languages, Igbo communities, proverbs are preserved in literature, particularly in Chinua Achebe's works, because there is an attempt by Europeans to erase that culture. Okay, so that is what we find in Indian writing in English. In Indian writing, whether it's a poem or a text or a drama, it is not written pure English. It is not possible because Indians are not pure English speakers. We are hybrid varieties. Hybrid is valued very high. Hybrid katrika is more valuable than not a takali or not a. It is a reality. So we have rich linguistic resources which we bring in our when we are writing our creative writing. Amita Ghosh, Sea of Poppies, I think you are familiar with, records pidgins, Bhojpuri, Laskari speech, colonial lingua francas, and functions as archive of maritime linguistic contact zones. Now quickly moving to the sixth one, technology and transformation of narrative power. As I told you in the beginning, the sixth axiomatic statement that I listed, narrative power is increasingly shaped by technology. The digital age has transformed narrative engagement in unprecedented ways. No doubt about it. On the one hand, digital platforms have democratized. Okay, anyone can use technology and have access. Blogs, podcasts, or social media enable counter discourses, counter narratives to emerge. Movements such as Me Too show how personal stories can become collective intervention. Yet, technology has also introduced algorithmic gatekeeping, surveillance, platform economies, and linguistic bias embedded in AI system. A social linguistic approach helps us ask certain urgent questions like whose language is recognized by technology. There are 6,000 plus languages in the world. How many languages are patronized by technology? You know that. Go to Google website, Google know which language is used more frequently, which narratives are amplified, which narratives are suppressed. How do digital platforms reshape power relations in storytelling? So my key argument is that technology reshapes narrative authority, access, and circulation. I give you two examples from American literature. Dave Eggers' The Circle. That narrative critiques how digital transparency and surveillance reshapes storytelling, identity, and agency, and the novel reveals how narratives are monitored and commodified. And similarly, Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad. Most of the chapters are in the form of PowerPoints, not in the usual chapterization form, reflects how narrative form itself changes under technological conditions. Now let me come to the last point this brings me to the heart of the conference's theme, practicing narrative engagements. Narrative engagement is not only analytical, it is ethical, it is a pedagogical, it is a political. Be it a classroom or research or public discourse, practicing narrative engagement means these four things. You just ask whether we are spending time for if you think that you are engaged with a narrative. First one is listening attentively to marginalized voices. Are we listening attentively to marginalized voices or dominant voices? No. Are we listening to the voice of Shylock or the dominant Christian characters? This Jewish character or that character? When you are reading Othello, who is the dominant character? Who is the victim? Whom do we listen to? Number two, recognizing linguistic diversity. As I told you, epistemic richness. And third, resisting deficit models of language, that is upholding monolingualism or elitist norms. And finally, fostering dialogue and inclusive storytelling practices. This closely aligns with, in fact, contemporary goals of what UGC is talking now about, and he has created a lot of pandemonium last 3-4 days. Equity, Tamil Nadu is a land where social justice is celebrated, so and therefore student community did not rise against this 2026 UG's regulations on equity, whereas North Indian, UP and Delhi, they are rising, and no wonder that Supreme Court, which is occupied by majority of the judges, are they belong to upper caste community, immediately stayed it. Just 2 days after announcement, they stayed it. Okay, so equity and social justice and inclusive education. Now, within this last point, seventh one, the practicing narrative engagement, I have framed about 7 short movements. Okay, so we have to move from, when you talk about narrative engagement, we move from reading to witnessing. Okay, when you are engaged with the narratives, we move from reading to witnessing, because narrative engagement starts with cultivating the capacity to listen, especially voices historically denied credibility, but we just overlook. So the first thing that we have to enlarge, we have to increase, we have to enhance our capacity to listen to the marginalized voices. Okay, as usual, I have given 2 examples. Number 1 is, if this is a man, it is a narrative by Primo Levi, demands ethical listening, not simply emotional consumption. We should not consume narratives emotionally. Though we say that literature is expression of emotions, we have to guard against ourselves such kind of mindless consumerist tendency of emotional consumption, but we must have kind of ethical listening, because when you move from reading to witnessing, readers become witnesses. Okay, not just spectators. There is not a lot of gap between the narrative and the reader. When there is an engagement, you are not simply a spectator, but you become a witness, and models how narratives can train moral attention. Again, Mahasava Devi's a short narrative, Breast Giver, forces readers to confront complicity in systems of exploitation. Narrative engagement here means recognizing one's own position within the structure of power, not merely empathizing. Empathizing is not that important compared to recognizing one's position. So narratives function as ethical encounters that demand accountability. Number 2, you move from dominant stories to resistance. These are the days we talk about resistance literature. Engaged narratives contest hegemonic histories. You have to question it. Okay, and official truths. What is official need not be truths. So official truths must be contested. For example, by narrating the Dalit Christian life in non-standard Tamil registers in Karukku, Bama challenges casteist literary norms. Okay, narrative itself becomes a political act of reclaiming the voice lost over the centuries. Again, Tiango's Petals of Blood rewrite post-colonial history from below. History not coming from above, but coming from below, by resisting elitist nationalist narratives. I told you, Nehru's glimpses into the world or discovery of India, and foregrounding collective struggle. And third one, we move from silencing to self-authorization. Narrative engagement empowers marginalized subjects to name themselves. We don't, upper caste people or not, the people who are at the center need not name the marginalized people. Marginalized people name themselves on their own terms, not terms dictated by others. For example, Lord's Zami, a new spelling of my name, it's a kind of biomythography, narrates survival through language. It constructs identity through language, memory, and community. And this work demonstrates narrative as a mode of survival and affirmation. So narratives become tools for reclaiming dignity and visibility that are lost to section of audience. And the next one is, it's a move from classroom analysis to social awareness. Engaged in narratives reshape how knowledge is taught, how knowledge is learned. In Paulo Frere's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, his dialogic style models education as co-creation of meaning. Meaning is not created by the writer alone, not created by the teacher alone, but it's a co-creation rather than transmission. Writer is not transmitting meaning, teacher is not transmitting meaning, whereas readers and students along with the writers and teachers, they co-create meaning. And this Adich's essay talk, the dangers of a single story transform how we teach reading itself. Okay, it functions narratively to expose epistemic injustice and transform reading practices. So, narratives cultivate literacy. Narratives cultivate reflexivity. And next one is we have to move from pain to public record. Narratives convert individual experience into collective memory. Okay, what is personal experience becomes collective memory and often fills the gaps left by official archive. Think of Toni Morrison's Beloved. This novel turns a trauma into collective memory. It's not trauma suffered by the protagonist, but trauma becomes a collective memory. It recovers silenced histories of slavery by showing how narrative engagement enables communal healing, not healing of an individual, communal healing and historical justice. Again, the writer whom I quoted a little earlier, Pakistani writer Saadat Hasan Manto's partisan stories force societies to confront uncomfortable truths. We have to face it, uncomfortable truths rather than nationalist myths. So thus narratives participate in truth-telling and restoration justice. And last but one, we have moved from page to platform. Narrative engagement today in a technologized world includes digital storytelling and technologically mediated voices. Teji Cole's Known and Strange Things reflects on digital witnessing, global attention, and ethical spectatorship in online spaces. And in citizen journalism and the testimonial narratives like Dalit Camera, a digital storytelling initiative, digital narratives bypass institutional gatekeeping and enable grassroots storytelling. Thus, narratives become tools of activism, documentation, and community building. I always believe that literature students, literature teachers are basically activists, social activists. But unfortunately, only some writers like Magaswa Devi or God of Small Things write and all. But some people, some writers know they become social activists. Other people, they live only air-conditioned rooms and write something for those who are living under the sun. Okay, so we are basically activists. And the last one is we move from, when we talk about narrative engagement, we move from monologue to a conversation. Engaged narratives invite a dialogue rather than closure, in which all teachers are experts. We say that this is what this poem about. This is what the text is about. This is what this character is about. Okay, so we try to give a closure rather than initiating a dialogue. So Bhaktiyan polyphony reminds us that narrative engagement is dialogic, not authoritative. The text that I would like to quote is Amitav Ghosh, The Shadow Lines, one of the older texts, resist singular truths and foster dialogic understanding across borders and history. All my 130 articles, always I end with conclusions. I never say conclusion because there can't be one conclusion. There could be several conclusions because we are living in a world where there are multiple truths. What is a truth to me is a falsehood for someone else. So you cannot thrust your conclusion on to the readers. You have to keep it wide open. So eraser shouldn't be there. Closure shouldn't be there. There must be pluralism. Narrative engagement must cultivate pluralism and ethical disagreement. So friends, I completed 7. I come to last but one. Why does this matter? Why does social linguistics of narratives matter? Why does it matter now? Friends, we live in an age of polarization. I think you all agree with me. I wrote an article, sent to a journal, very famous journal. Politely they declined it. He said, you try this some other journal, not in our journal. Because I have given the title, Relevance of English Studies in an Age of Polarization. They think that I have argued it against the union government. So we live in an age of polarization. People are not looked at as a people. We are reduced to some statistics. You are a Christian, you are a Hindu, this and that. They don't recognize me as a personality. So we live in an age of polarization. We also live in an age of misinformation. With social media, we have more misinformation than we don't know what is information, what is correct and what is incorrect. We are living in an age of identity conflict. We are all living in an age of ecological and humanitarian crisis. So in this particular age, narratives shape public imagination. That's a one good thing that literature can do for this society. So narratives shape public imagination. Who is seen as a human? Who is seen as a disposable? Who is whose sufferings counts? So public imagination is shaped by narratives. So without social linguistic awareness, narratives can reinforce domination. With social linguistics, narratives can become tools of justice. Narratives can become tools of recognition and solidarity. Let me conclude, my friends. I think that I'm coming to close. Social linguistics of narratives teaches us that three things. I conclude. Number one, I told you, language is never neutral. Nobody speaks a neutral language. Everybody, when we use a language, it carries a truckle load of ideologies. Okay, so when you read a literary text, which is written only in, any narrative is written only in language, so they are not simply stories, they carry lots and lots of ideologies. So language is not neutral, languages can never be neutral, and narratives are never apolitical. Each narrative is political in one way or other. They are not apolitical. And finally, narratives are always in the, identities are always in the making. Nobody has created identity given to us. We say that our swama appadithaan sir. His disposition is like that. His self is like that. Avanga tata madri, avanga amma madri. We always, we make this kind of stereotypical statements. No, the all world one. All those things are contested. As we grow, our identity grows. As we grow, our identities also change. And as we grow, we acquire multiple identities also. Okay. So to practice narrative engagement is not only to analyze the stories as we do, but also to change how we listen, how we teach, how we circulate, how we respond to those stories. Okay. So by intersecting language, literature, and technology, we can reimagine narratives not as closures, but as open, dialogic, and transformative practices. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very witty, engaging, and humor filled keynote address that not only sparked laughs among the audience, but also made us rethink the role of language and narrative in different social contexts. Now, if I may take the liberty of quoting from Sir's keynote address, to narrate a story is to intervene in social life. Similarly, we believe that to ask questions is to intervene in the realm of knowledge. Allowing thought to meet inquiry, we now open the floor for the questions. Audience may now put forth their questions for the keynote speaker.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the insights that you have given us. It was very engaging. And I have one question for you. So, what is your take on art forms carrying the social status of people that they perform the art form itself? What is your take on art forms carrying social status and people carrying their social status who perform the art form itself? Yes, sir. Like art forms carrying the social status.
Yeah, it is true. It is a social reality. But the question is, what do you mean by art form? Who treats it as a social status?
Okay, sir. So is it necessary that art forms need to carry the social status identity, or a certain art form is for certain group of people, things like that? Is it very necessary that art form should carry the social identity or the social
It is
status?
something inevitable, because as I told you that all art forms are created in social contexts. Okay, and as also told you that who has created that art form, and that writer or that artist has their own social background, cultural background. Uh, a writer cannot write what he doesn't know. Okay, so sometimes it is cultivated. This art form identity is something cultivated. When you want to move with higher, higher echelons of society, supposing you are visiting an art exhibition. Okay, so lots of things are exhibited. Even though you don't understand, like Mona Lisa picture, you don't know whether man or woman, whether Mamiyar or Marmugal, how does this lady or man look like? Without having any understanding, you pretend as if you have kind of aesthetic pleasure when you look at that particular art form. So much so, films also like that. So when the way you appreciate, the way you attribute certain identities, social identities to certain art forms, also marks a kind of aesthetic cultivation, literary cultivation that comes to us automatically. We may imitate, or we may be consciously using it as a yardstick. This identity is something inevitable, but the question is that it is a pre-created self. Already somebody has created it, whether you buy it or you reject it. Okay, so but my argument is that only through narrative, only through the narrative engagement, identity is born. So we shouldn't assume somebody's creation as your identity.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, sir. First of all, let me thank you at the outset. I'm here, sir. Yeah, for giving us such a comprehensive plenary session infused with a lot of humor and thought-provoking inputs. And my question today is like, do digital narratives democratize voices, or do they reproduce the older hierarchical hierarchies in more subtle algorithmic forms?
The second one, I already made it clear that it seems to, at the surface level, technology seems to have democratized our access, authority to storytelling, but it is reinforcing inequality that is already there in society. Okay, so as I told you, which language does a technology favor, patronize, Tamil or English? So that question has to be solved. And whose stories or who are capable of participating in digital storytelling? Not all of us, only a select few. As I told you, that technology seems to have democratized, but it has not democratized. It reinforces inequality that is already prevalent in society. That's why I told you that at the beginning, that technology has got a very minimal role to play as far as human institutions like literature, language, culture, which are irreducibly human. So where we can't, we need not depend on technology to a very large extent. Technology can be a mediator, but not a meaning maker. Humans alone can do that. AI is doing a lot of things, but for AI to do a lot of things, you need NI also. It is NI who has created AI, and AI cannot go out of control of now. Now, people talk about ChatGPT. Now it's a good news for students, community, scholars, that. Now you have a few apps, no, which if you use it, that no one can find out whether it's NI created or AI generated. So NI is always superior. Human is always superior to technology, and technology is condemned to be inferior to human beings. So technology cannot solve human problems. Human problems can be solved only by human beings. We choose not to solve it. That's a problem. But technology as a mediator is doing a lot of things. After use of computers in, for example, Indian Railway reservation system, in up to 1980, a lot of corruption in reservation system in railways. But now it's a corruption free because of technology. On your mobile phone, you can book the tickets, no intervention. Passport officer, everything has gone online. So there are so many departments where technology is used as a mediator. Corruption has been controlled. But to be corrupt or not to be corrupt is the sole decision of the human beings. Technology cannot influence.
So, first of all, I would like to thank for your insightful presentation.
Kindly hold your
Yeah. First, the thought that it comes to me is regarding the statement that you have given to us that the language is dead when women do not speak, right? So, what I would like to know regarding on this statement is that in language endangerment, the definition that we study on language death is based on intergenerational language transmission, one aspect. Another is that we look into the speaker, the population, the speaker of language. And then the third, we look into the dominant of the language that is used. So I would like to know, sir, where could you please clarify us that your statement, where it fits in the dominant in the greater linguistics definition of language that in the broader aspect of language endangerment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In social linguistics, language death. When I said Sanskrit is dead, I said Sanskrit is dead in one of the conferences before the pandemic, international conference in one of the cities in Kerala. You know that Malayalam is highly Sanskritized language, and that is one of the few states where you have Central University for Sanskrit also. When you say Sanskrit is dead, a lot of opposition from the audience. How can you say Sanskrit is dead? Then I requested them, you please talk in Sanskrit to me that Sanskrit is not dead. You say Sanskrit is not dead only in Malayalam or English. You kindly say it in Sanskrit. Is there any tea shop? Is there any place in the marketplace where business is transacted in Sanskrit? Government, as you say, government is spending 300 crores on maintaining. We in social linguistics we call language maintenance. In all within academia, we have English Literary Association because English has to be maintained. Because a foreign language has to be maintained. And all colleges, there is an association for Tamil also. Because Tamil has to be maintained. It's a political. When English is to be maintained, why can't Tamil? But the point is that government is spending 300 crores annually on maintaining Sanskrit by offering programs, running Sanskrit 13 or 16 Sanskrit universities and so on. Whereas Tamil politicians lament that union government has set up also only 30 crores on maintaining classical now. But again, there is a lot of politics into it. Usually, a language is declared as a classical language only after its death. See, if you want to be resurrected, you should be dead first. When I am quite alive, when I am not buriable, when I am not buried, how can I be resurrected? So, a language is declared classical only when it is dead. Because of political compulsions, Tamil was declared as it's a living language. But Tamil need not have been declared as a classical language. It's a political decision. When Tamil was done, first living language, Tamil was declared classical language. Then came Malayalam, then came Kannada, then came Telugu, and all these languages have been declared. It's only a politics of language. But your question is that a language is dead. I said language is dead. In social linguistics, when language doesn't have community of speakers day to day, there must be 1,000 people, there must be a village, there must be a street where Sanskrit is used as a mode of daily communication, better communication. Then if it is not happening, then it is a dead. I not only use a Sanskrit in my article, I also use a Hebrew. Hebrew was a dead language, but it has been resurrected. In Israel, it has become a living language because the language is used by women folk at home. Hebrew, everybody now Hebrew is used for research. If you go to Israel, within academia, you can hear people using English at canteen, at cafeteria. Whereas within the department, science and technology, within the department, they are using only Hebrew. Hebrew is used by women at home first, and therefore kids started learning Hebrew. Now Hebrew has been revived. The dead language has become living language now. It is resurrected. Whereas it is not possible, it has not been a possibility in India because it is not a domestic language. It is not used at home. Of course, I am not using it literally. I am using this concept only metaphorically. When I say that a language is dead when women are denied to use it, I don't mean it literally. I use it metaphorically. Meaning is that language must be used as a home language first for it to continue to survive. That sense only I use in that article. Official disciplinary definition of language death is when there is no community to speak it, it becomes a death. David Crystal, a social linguist, living social linguist, he says once in 15 days a language dies. Once in 15 days a language dies. No, when the statement may sound banal. Last 15 days gone, we are going to another 15 days. Which language die? You might ask. But his prediction in the book called Language Death, he has written a book called Language Death. There he says once in 15 days. Now you have 6,000 plus languages used in the world now. If languages die at the rate of 1 in 15 days, how many languages die in a month? 2. How many languages might die in a year? 24. How many languages will die in 100 years? Beyond our imagination, no? 100 years. So 240 languages. Then we do understand in the course of time many languages will die. So when there is no user, when tsunami struck Andaman Nicobar Islands, there was a news item that a language was dead. Because there was only 2 speakers of that tribal language. One washed away. Of the 2 speakers of that community, one was dead and one was alive. Language cannot be alive with one user because she cannot use it. I think that one person would have died by now, I believe. I don't know. So when there is no user, language dies. It's called language death.
So I have a question. So my name is Sangeeta, and my question is regarding your remark about the dominant narratives. So at this point, I am interested in invoking the genre of historical fiction. So I realize historical fiction writers do not consider them historiographers, and by means of paratextual references, they do call their text a novel. They make it very clear. But then I'm just interested in your take on the role of historical fiction as a genre in intervening into dominant or the so-called universal narratives. Do they do any role there? Do they have any role there at all, or do we just take them as a form of fiction and then go about the business like nothing has mattered at all?
You're talking about language?
The role of
truth.
Yeah.
Historical truth that they are trying to narrate.
Yeah, but with the reference to the fact that they do not claim to be historiographers. They are very clear about that. So why then do we need this genre of historical fiction then?
Yeah, these writers, some writers become worldly wise, street smart. Like you have a disclaimer in social media, YouTube channels and all the opinions expressed by not of me, only of the particular person. In films also, and the writers also that writers know, they know, because what happened to Perumal Murugan, people become very street smart now, because they say that everything that is written is only purely fictional. Because once you say that this is precisely because the debate between 2 great theorists, Michel Foucault, the concept of death of the author, Ronald Barthes' idea, and the Michel Foucault's idea of death of the author. Michel Foucault argues that author cannot die. Author must be present in the text in order to justify their viewpoint. When there is a litigation, author will be taken to court. Okay, so they are a bit street smart enough to say that all that it's only imaginary production. It's up to the readers to discern what is historical, what is a factional, what is fictional, what is fact, and what is fiction. So beautiful fusion of, and when you read in autobiographies, life narratives. What is fiction, what is fact is blurred. In postmodern world also, it's very difficult. And if you ask authors, they will say that it's a literary production. It's up to you to say what is historical and what is not historical. It's all kind of compromise that writers make. There may be an element of truth, but the writers alone know whether it is a historical, to what extent they are historical and what extent they are historical, they alone know. But again, that we need not be unduly worried about the authorial confession, because after this reader response theory, we are empowered to judge, because as I told you, Paulo Ferreira's idea of co-creators. Writers alone don't create. We also create a history. Historical narratives created by authors may be imperfect. Readers know by adding their own understanding of what constitutes history can make it a little more perfect. Language is also like that. Language used by the historical narratives, they need not deal with what is so-called, as I told, government truths or official language. Okay, but I think that there are writers like Amitav Ghosh, who is called a dissertation writer. He doesn't write any novel without doing first research. All his novels are research based. He spends years of research before he starts writing a novel. So all his novels are historical in nature. But then, take a Calcutta Chromosome. It's based on certain real incident that took place during the 19th century. But what is history? What is a history? It depends on the readers also. We can do our own research on our part, and then we can say that yours is 100% historical. You have distorted history. This is not the kind of language that was used during 16th century. Readers have got every right. Readers have got as much right as the writers as to complement another query that were made here. A few months ago, I wrote an article on My Last Duchess. Usually in classrooms, we talk about My Last Duchess like other poems by Robert Browning as a perfect examples of dramatic monologue. So what? He created that particular art form and he used it. If it is something great, other people should have followed suit. No Victorian writer took him so seriously. Nobody followed a dramatic monologue. It is a doctor who decides whether cesarean or this operation or that operation. What has patient to do with that? A gynecologist will decide on the mode of. We cannot decide. Something like that. A writer chooses to do a particular art form. But when I wrote that article, I interpreted it not as a dramatic monologue. That is not none of my business. That's the business of Browning. I reread only from a feminist point of view. That article also faced a lot of resistance from two journals. Third journal only accepted my article. Because as I told you that sometimes you have to confront unpalatable, unacceptable truths. So I don't want to teach, I never taught it, that poem. I don't want to teach. Given opportunity, I will not teach My Lost Duchess as a dramatic monologue, but I will teach it from a new critical idiom that I am familiar with, feminism. So readers have got a right to read history as we like. That's why postmodernists, they say history is his story. History is his story. Her story. History is her story from a particular viewpoint, It all depends on the historians also have. You have leftist historian, that famous leftist Indian historian. What's her name? Contemporary historian. But a leftist, so she writes everything from leftist point of view. If you are a rightist, how you look at emergency? If you are a Congress guy, how will you look at emergency? You have, take for example, Tamil poet Vairamuthu again. Vairamuthu, to which political ideology does he belong? Does he propagate? He shares a dice with which kind of politicians? So naturally that will be reflected in his writings also. So all historians are objective. Postmodernism contests that. Histories are histories only. Histories are as personal as literature. That's what we talk about new historicism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your remarkable clarity, for your generous patience. I hope sir's insights have deepened our understanding. Thank you once again, sir, for your uh, address and for answering the questions. As we briefly pause in our discussion, we kindly request you to join us for a short tea break. It's just for 10 minutes. So please do join us outside and be back sharply after 10 minutes. Thank you.
We now move into the final plenary session of the conference, one that invites us to reflect on pedagogy, not merely as instruction, but as space where voice is discovered, agency is reclaimed, and the writing self takes place. To introduce the speaker for this session, I invite Dr. Ayan Subeni, Assistant Professor, Department of LCS, to kindly introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Anita Devi Pillai. Ma'am, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Anita Devi Pillai, a distinguished educator, an anthropological linguist, a writer whose work has made a significant impact across education, research, and the literary world. Dr. Pillai is an associate professor at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, where she teaches and researches in anthropological linguistics, literary studies, and creative writing. With over 2 decades of experience, her academic and professional journey stretches across pre-university, undergraduate, postgraduate, and teacher education contexts. Dr. Pillai is a nationally recognized educator, recipient of multiple prestigious honors, including NIE's Excellence in Teaching Award, the Ministry of Education Service to Education Award, and most recently, the National Day Commendation Medal conferred by the Prime Minister's Office, Singapore, in recognition of her outstanding contributions to education and teaching. As an applied linguist, Dr. Pillai has conducted long-term ethnographic research on minority language communities, particularly the Malayali diaspora in Singapore, focusing on language maintenance, migration, oral history, and community literary practices. Her acclaimed monograph, From Kerala to Singapore, Voices from the Singapore Malayali Community, remains a seminal work in this field. She has also served as a research fellow with Singapore's National Heritage Board and as guest curator of a national exhibition on the Malayali community. Equally accomplished as a writer and translator, Dr. Pillai's creative and scholarly works bridges language, memory, and migration. Her translation of the Tamil novel Simbawang received national and international recognition and was recently selected as one of the Singapore President's recommendation reads. Equally, currently, Dr. Pillai serves as a writer, as the president of the Singapore Association for Applied Linguistics, and continues to lead, publish, and mentor across disciplines and borders. We are truly honored to have with us a scholar and a professor whose work manifests intellectual rigor, cultural sensitivity, and public engagement. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anita Devi Pillai to deliver today's keynote address on the topic, From Syllabus to Self, Reclaiming Agency and Voice in Writing Pedagogy. The stage is yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, fellow academic students. My deepest gratitude and thanks to the university, SRM College, as well as the organizing committee, Professor Algerson, Professor Thomas Edison, Professor Sumati, Professor Hema, and of course Professor Kavita Nair, whom I met. My deepest appreciation to them for the invitation for hosting me here and to give me an opportunity to share with you some of the important work that we're doing in the other part of the world, one other part of the world. I'm Dr. Anita Devi Pillai. I'm a fourth generation Singaporean. So I've got roots in India, of course. My roots are from Palakkad, Kerala. And I wear multiple hats at the university. I teach at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. If any of you would like to go to NTU to study, do talk to me later. Yeah, I would love to have you there. And I wear multiple hats and I have 3 different research areas that I work with. And today I'm going to share with you one of the areas, and one of it is on pedagogy, and I'm going to focus on writing pedagogy specifically. Singapore is unique in a sense. Our teacher education is rather centralized. It's a very small country. right? And there's only one teacher education, a school of education, one teacher education institute for the whole country, which primarily means that all English language teachers or Tamil teachers, for instance, they all come to us. So there are about 30 of us who teach in the department, much smaller than your department, 30 of us who teach department, and we teach across the courses, undergraduates, postgraduates, that includes your masters as well as your doctoral studies students, as well as we do the skills as well for all of NTU. And and professional development, teachers who go out to teach, English language teachers, for instance, who are already teaching in the schools, be it primary, secondary, or junior college, which means from grades 1 to grades 12, they all come to us. So it gives us a lot of I won't use the word control. I'll say it gives us it gives us an opportunity to streamline things, right? We're all on the same page on many things. It gives us an opportunity to see how things are carried out in the schools as well. I'm not saying that the students are all the same, and you heard Professor John's speech as well. You know, it's one thing to deliver something, right? Like a writer, it's one thing to deliver something that you put a lot of thought into, and it's what the readers do with it. It's what the recipient does with it that really shapes the effect and impact of what you have in your hand, right? So here, sorry, let me set my timer as well. I'm quite before I start speaking, I'm quite conscious of the fact that I stand between you and lunch. Okay, so I will keep my talk to 45 minutes. If I have to skip slides, I'll be happy to talk about it afterwards with you. So the context I wanted to give you the context was of Singapore, of course, and it's in this lens that we started examining what happens in the classrooms, right? And what happens in the schools. We know a couple of things are incredibly important. Speaking and writing skills seem to be incredibly important because they're productive skills. So your listening and reading are passive skills, which of course we have different ways of assessing it. But reading and writing seems to get a lot of focus, be it in IELTS exam, be it for you to show your proficiency in the language. That's what seems to get a lot of attention in the classrooms as well. But despite having thought through the syllabus, despite ensuring that at a national level we trained everyone in the same way, the same trainers, right? The same faculty members train the same people and send them out to teach, then what happens? So we had a large study, with 3 different researchers. We were studying what teachers were doing. We're looking at what happens in the classrooms, and it's a multi-pronged approach. And today, I'm just going to talk about agency and voice in writing pedagogy. I'm going to look at different levels. Primary is grade 1 to 6, as I said. Secondary is grade 7 to 10. So 11 and 12, not everyone does 11 and 12. We call it the junior college level. A lot of students after grade 10, they choose to take, they go on to the polytechnics where they do a diploma, perhaps in engineering or theater or psychology, or, one of those. So it's a prelude to university, but they do a 3-year diploma. Grades 11 and 12 is the Cambridge A-level examination that they take, the Cambridge A-level examinations, and only about 10 or 15% of the grade 1 cohort actually even qualifies for those 2 years. So the reason being, I think it's far more suited for those who are aiming to do law or medicine, because it's still exam focused, it's not hands-on yet. They still take the Cambridge exams, the 3-hour papers for multiple subjects that they've got to complete. So it's specifically suited for one group. And so I'm not focusing on them for today's talk. I will focus on what happens in the other 3 levels and how these writing teachers, despite having one curriculum, one way of being trained, despite all the variables being so controlled, they still found ways to negotiate what happens in the classroom, all in very good ways. And that then in turn feeds back into how we do the teacher training. Okay, so a rough overview of what I'm going to briefly touch on. is how writing is shaped by outcomes, rubrics, assessment cultures, teacher agency in enacting writing pedagogy at the primary level, creativity at the high school level, and then immersive creative writing practices at the teacher training level. Yeah. So from reframing writing pedagogy from syllabus driven instruction to writer identity. So I really like the fact that this wasn't coordinated at all when, Professor John talked about identity, both reader and writer identity, and how that influences what you understand of the text, because that was something that we found after we've done this, but this is a 2-3 year study and it's the first time I'm consolidating this. Yeah. So three things to take note of, right? When you think of agency. Now, I understand that in this room I have scholars, academics, and students from different disciplines, and therefore I'm not going to just focus on just what it means in this context. Okay, so when you talk about agency, what you're talking about is something. It's a variable. It's not something that you can. It's not something that means the same thing to everyone. Having agency, you perform it in different ways. Agency is a capacity, of course, whether you're able to do it. And it's also an ecological thing. Why is it ecological? Agency depends on the environment you're in. Things that I'm able to accomplish or carry out, my team and I, my research team and I are able to carry out in Singapore may not be, and perhaps certainly not be one that you can carry out in another context, in another country. Because why ecological? Because there are many other factors. It's the same English language syllabus. It could be the same language goals that we are aiming towards. We could all be even taking the same exams, be it IELTS or Cambridge, GCSE, A levels or O levels. But the environment, essentially the environment determines how it is delivered. The teacher's background, the teacher's professional development, the teacher's understanding of what it means, not from our end, but from the sort of the way they were taught. If you were taught in a certain way, you carry it with you. You value certain practices beyond despite all the training, etc. Right? So this is the context of teaching of writing in the primary level. So your teachers as readers. So teaching writing, right? I mean writing pedagogy, and then you think that okay, I'm going to give you the curriculum. I'm going to teach you how to teach it. I'm going to go through lots of activities. I'm going to show you the materials. We are going to practice. We're going to have mini lessons. Mini practice lessons in class. I'm going to give you feedback, and you're going to be fine. What we forget is reading and writing is like, I suppose, making a dish, right? If writing is producing and the final act of cooking, like let's think of it as a food, right? I mean, then reading is your ingredient. I'm always amazed when I meet people, English language teachers in the schools and I ask them, what are you reading? It's always my first question, right? What are you reading? What have you read recently that you like? And they go, I have no time to read. I wake up at 5, I have to be in school by 7, I start teaching at 7:45, I've got no time to read by the time I get home. And then you wonder, because you cannot be delivering a template to your students, right? It has to be something, you have to be engaged in the process, you have to be a co-creator as well. Today, you're hearing a lot of common terminologies across the two talks, of course, because I think all of us are on the same page when you're talking about theories and what's happening with the world around us. So teachers as readers is a very important concept, which hardly gets sufficient attention. And teachers as writers is another important concept. This is not new. This is something that in the US, they've already talked about for a long time, for at least 30, 40 years. But it's not something that has caught on. So you have, let me give you an example. You don't want to learn swimming from a coach who doesn't get into the water, who dresses up in the most expensive swimsuit, stands there and barks instructions at you, or maybe gives you instructions gently and very, accurately with lots of feedback and all, but doesn't get wet, right? Doesn't get into the water. So the coach hasn't actually showed you that the coach can be successful in doing what the coach expects you to do, right? The assumption is because you're a coach, you've got a license, you know how to do it. No, so the whole idea is you have far more faith in a person when the person shows you they're able to do it. So a writing teacher must be a writer themselves, right? If you want to study the short story form, how do I write a short story form from someone, the person does not only have to have the qualifications, the doctoral education, that will enable them to get the job, of course, but they should also be practitioners. They should also be writing short stories themselves for them to be able to teach you how to write it, right? Not just go through all the steps. Now, some of the things that we found in the findings was, number one, teachers were completely influenced, despite all training, about their past-oriented influences. For example, there was a teacher that we met who said, so far for 2 years we've been in the same writing circle and we gather every week to write and critique each other's work. So they were doing this on their own. They were getting together, right? I find it that it's as scary to have my writing under scrutiny, but over time I became a far more reflective writer. And I've also stopped passing comments like, you have to write something by this time to my students, because if we have these timed activities and we tell students that, oh, you've got to finish this by this time. But when you sit down to write, you realize, oh gosh, it's not as easy. So this whole realization that, it's easier to give comments, but it's harder to be able to do it. And only when you do try it out, and you should try it out. Not that I tried it out when I was 12. At 12, I could do it, so why can't you? The world has changed, right? So that when teachers were able to sit through that, they were also far more empathetic. Now, that's a very positive story that I'm sharing with you, because there are the other stories that wasn't as positive. And so data suggests that teachers strongly believe that students need to enjoy writing. But what enjoyment entailed is completely different. Must you be happy with the topic? Must you understand the topic? Must you enjoy sitting in one place? Sitting in one place and writing and creating, all creations require a lot of patience, be it art, music, all creations, right? Requires a lot of patience that somehow seems to be a scarce thing these days, because we are so used to reading short articles, not sustained reading anymore. We read a little thing and then we click on a link and hyperlink and we go on to different things. So past-oriented influences, one of the things is essentially they come to realize that if they are forced to be writers, it's not going to work. They've got to enjoy what they're working on. And therefore, that also changes the way they teach their students, right? And there were teachers within the course of the study itself. We found that they had changed, right? I think for children, they value fun. Fun is everything to them, and I would argue fun is everything to all of us as well, right? At the same time, I don't want that love for writing or whatever that's left of writing to be lost in the process. So when you focus overtly on exam strategies, for example, they realized they were not developing writers. So that was a realization that teachers were getting from practicing the art of writing. So professional histories and perceived needs for assessment also came in as important aspects. What do I mean by that? Perceived needs for assessment, we are all, for my fellow faculty members here, I know there's some students here as well, fellow faculty members here, we are all driven by what do they need to know, what do I need to ensure the students are able, what should the students be able to perform, right, at the exam, so that they have learned this. So this understanding of this, if they need to be able to write a particular type of text, let's say they need to write a research paper, then you're going to be completely focused on getting them to write a research paper. This is at the university level, right? But whether they've understood the nuances of what goes into, for instance, the methodology section or the literature review section, that doesn't come into play anymore. Okay, in the case of one of the participants in the study, right, this is what, the tension of intention was quite a huge part, quite a huge part to play in what they said. So for instance, my belief that they should be reading widely, that writing should be fun. Sometimes it can just be gibberish, for instance. I write something and then someone else continues the story, and then you write something else with funny and totally irrelevant. How I feel and how I act are a bit different. So the teacher said, I believe that you should be writing, it should be fun. But then when I go into the classroom, I end up, doing very systematic things with the class. And she's specifically referring to this co-writing activity that they do. So remember, this first part of the study is the very young kids, right? So with young children, right, from grades 1 to 6, there's a co-writing activity. We call it the MLE. And they write the first sentence. The teacher writes the first sentence. First, of course, they read a story. Remember, the ingredients are needed for the soup, to making of the soup. And then they write, the teacher writes the first sentence. Then each person in the class takes turn to write a sentence. So you have no control over where the text is going. Someone can make a narrative genre, speculative fiction as well. It's just a matter of one sentence that can push you into speculative fiction genre, and the next person has the obligation to continue this trend or pull it back. And that takes a lot of control over the language as well to be able to do that. The aspirations that these teachers had was for the students was that they wanted them to be confident, expressive, risk takers, purposeful, influential. These were all very, very large goals, right? So when you talk to them, you go like, hey, fabulous, these are all very committed people. And of course they had the option of being part of the study. So of course only those who were really committed, truly committed came in. And then the aspirations they saw themselves as writing teachers was they wanted to be able to adapt the lesson for every child in the class. Now, in Singapore, our class size is about 40 students per class, right? And to be able to adapt, and they come from they speak different languages, different backgrounds as well. So to be able to adapt to such a diverse group of students, it's a noble goal, but it becomes really, really demanding on the teacher. It involves getting to know the students really well as well, and understanding where they are in their writing process. And the next thing is increased opportunities for writing different types of text. Now, again, you're stuck by the syllabus because at each level, we have certain genre types that we want them to acquire. Certainly, the narrative is the first thing that's the first thing that anyone encounters, right? When you're a young kid, you're a baby, what does your mom tell you? They tell you a story. What does your grandma tell you? So the narrative structure is somehow subconsciously something that we're very familiar with. So we start with the narrative, but we certainly go on to teach them procedural text. We do little activities like the ice cream. Let's make ice cream, and then we teach them procedural text. We show them. We use the experiential approach to show them how to do it. Embracing an evolving ed tech landscape. Now, this is easier said than done, because while the technology is available and the government is happy to fund reasonable as well, meaningful softwares that you want to include in your class, it's quite another thing to get everyone trained at the same time, or to get the whole class involved in the same ways when you're working with very young kids. Okay. Cultural conditioning was a surprise for us because we found that there are pre-existing orientations on what a writing classroom should be, shaped a lot of things that they were doing. So if they had a lot of fun in one particular class and under a teacher when they were young, they were doing the same thing. Never mind the syllabus and everything else. They're following the syllabus. I'm not saying they're not, but they took on that persona of the teacher that they had, that they looked up to. Okay, there was one teacher that I spoke to who said, oh, that particular teacher was very, very strict, and therefore, and my English teacher in grade, this level was very strict, but I learned a lot. And therefore, that's how I'm going to be in my class. And I go like, oh gosh, but what works for you may not work for the class. And then the syllabus has changed so much. I mean, we review our syllabus every 10 years, right? And we have greater integration of different aspects according to what is happening at that point in time. Like, for instance, we have incorporated creative writing as one of the elements as alternative assessment. this is keeping in line with the fact that the whole world is moving towards that as well. For instance, and in Australia, the English language exams for grades 11 and grades 12 and 10, right, involve a creative writing activity, a portfolio, and creative writing is growing as a space where we can get them to expand. Where we were always afraid of is how do you assess creativity? But assessment rubrics have also been created and tested out repeatedly in different countries, right? So it really was something that we were not expecting, that the fact that the fact that people their attitudes towards the writing curriculum was shaped so much by what they had experienced. Okay, I'm going to skip through the next 2 slides, and then okay. Now, there's another teacher who talked about, it was a very practical evaluative dimension that he spoke about. He says, I do have the eye on the PSLE and the milestone that they have to go through, but I'm very conscious about converging too quickly towards preparing them for the exams. This was very heartening to hear. Sorry, I must give you a context of PSLE. It's primary school leaving examination. So at the end of grade 6, they take a national exam. Grade 10 and 12, they take an international exam, the Cambridge exam. So grade 6 is internal. It's incredibly difficult, according to a lot of parents. There's a lot of drilling that takes place. I mean, it's very similar to India as well, right? I mean, education is prioritized. We are a country with no natural resources, mind you. There isn't nothing that we can say if you don't, if you're not going to study, you can do other things. I mean, there's very little. We don't have natural resources. Most of our homes are only 99-year lease. You don't inherit a house. You don't, from water to food to milk, everything. We buy everything from, the countries around us. We're very dependent that way. And we import a lot of, it's skills and education that helps to propel the country forward, right? So the grade 6 exam determines whether you get into a good school, according to the, we believe all schools are good schools, but certain schools, and there is no such thing as a recommendation, no provision for getting your child in just because you know someone. I could not get my son into a school in grade 1, which this particular school that I really liked, because that it's a very old established school, and it only if your father or grandfather has attended that school do you get in. And it becomes completely elite, right? Eventually, the fact that I teach at the university, teacher education, I knew the principals, I knew the teachers, I taught the teachers. It doesn't matter. I just can't get in. The system is such, you just follow the rules. If there's space and you live around the school, you get in. So that's the grades 1 to 6. So grade 7 really is when you can get in on your grades. Because grade 1, what grades do you have? You got nothing, right? You just get posted according to the area you live in. So grade 7, when they go into the schools, they need really good grades in all subjects, especially English, including English, because that's the main mode of communication, right? And there's a lot of training and drilling, and parents can become really upset if the teachers don't train you for the exams. Right? So what happens when you train for something, especially when it comes to language studies, right? At some point, you're going to forget to love the language. And forgetting to love the language means you just perform at a certain high level, but you will not be able to exceed, because you're going to sound like your teacher, you're going to reproduce vocabulary words, you're going to reproduce examples, etc., but you're not going to be able to go beyond that. Right? If you're not reading, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, if you don't look up additional things, you're going to all sound the same. So that the fact that the teacher was very, very concerned, despite having a positive attitude about the exam, really goes to show the impact of an exam, the washback theory as well that we talk about, right, on the system. Okay. Certainly one other thing was professional support, whether there was a lot of professional support for them to be able to move from only teaching to the exam and to encouraging and cultivating writers. Okay, so that was the first section. The second study that we had was that the second teacher did was looking at high school. Now, what happens in high school? You've already gotten a certain level of proficiency level in English language. You've not everybody makes it. So those who don't make it will go into vocational training. And we've set up an excellent system for vocational training, very fabulous campuses, lots of programs, and we've got system in place to ensure that if you're going to be going vocational training, you'll have the best vocational training ever. You should see some of their campuses, so beautiful, right? So those who remain now already have a certain level of proficiency, okay, and comparable with the world standards of native speakers of English. And I'm not saying they're all like, performing at a very high level. I'm saying they all have a certain level and it's already comparable. Okay. So then what happens? You've gotten more or less your language proficiency, your language accuracy, language use accuracy, vocabulary needs to be, vocabulary you can always expand on even as an adult. What happens? This is when we start focusing on creativity, right? So in many of the classrooms, what happens is that we teach in a very functional and formulaic way. So if you take argumentative writing, for instance, okay, if you're going to take should uniforms be banned, or should schools impose, should uniforms be banned in schools? So you wear your own clothes and come in. That's usually a debate topic, right? We teach them exactly how to structure the paper. Where does your thesis statement, where does your stand appear? Last line of the introductory paragraph. Where do you expand? How many points do you include? Where do you place your rhetorical statement? Rhetorical statement is a rhetorical map of the paper, right? Where do your opposing views appear? We teach them. It's almost like a template. I could put in all this, this is first line, write this class, second line, write this, third line. Your topic and content will differ, but the structure is so formulaic. What will I get? I'll get an entire class who will do well enough to get a B. I can get a B because it's just a matter of training. But that means when I send them out to the world, they will be functioning at a very low level. Can they write an argument? Can they write an opinion piece to the press? Can they stand and argue and debate something in front of people? No. For that, I need imagination and expressive words, and I need exploratory text, things that moves them beyond a formula, which is why creative writing is, I think, becoming far more dominant now, or making its presence felt in many ways, because it is one place where I can't just give you a formula, right? I can tell you, yeah, you need a story, you need a context, you need a conflict, I need a resolution. I can tell you the basic narrative structure, but I need you to be able to play around with it. And that's when you learn how to effectively be able to use the language. So first part was using the language, second part, and what teachers did in the classroom matter. The second part was, it's about moving away from the formulae, right? And again, we talked about, producing teacher writers. Why? Because only when they understood only when they, same analogy of the swimming coach, right? When you get into the water, that's only when you see a teacher writing with you, alongside with you, who doesn't just deliver the content, do you then get engaged. And we were quite heartened to see that we had a positive response from that. So the second teacher pointed this out, that the importance of creative writing in an AI dominated world. So essentially, when we get them to do this, we don't have the laptops in the class, right? In high school and primary school, they only have their devices out for certain lessons and certain activities. So they are still handwriting, and we believe a lot in it, because the exams at Cambridge, O-level exams and A-level exams are still handwritten exams. So, we make sure they trained in that. The teacher talked about how students were worried and anxious about their place in the world. They were thinking about what it means to be truly creative. Is this creative? Then I asked the teacher, did it make you laugh? Did you smile? Did you get upset? But none of the teachers were telling the students that. They were just saying, how they were doing according to the rubrics, right? So responding emotionally was also important. But we also found that students were getting very, very nervous. They were not so, at the beginning, they were not so open to this whole idea of, like, You mean you give me the freedom to write things? I can write anything I want. I'll tell you, at my university, I told my postgraduate creative writing class, first lesson, I said, I read something to them, and then I said, okay, you can write. For the next 15 minutes, we'll do writing. I gave them journals and a little bribe to entice my students to write, but do not use your computers. Handwrite for me. 15 minutes. I'll sit here, I'll write with you. They're like, I said, any questions? Lots of hands go up. I was like, what? Okay. What do you want us to write about? I said, anything. Anything. So I know that look. When you say anything, it's the look that says, oh, she didn't prepare. She's just coming in, reading to us from her favorite book, and that too was my book, right? Or something I had published. She didn't prepare. So I know, I can see my kids exchanging glances. I said, no, anything you want. Then the next question is 15 minutes. Yeah. So do I leave a line? Do you want, like what's the spacing? I said, it's up to you. Then they were like, okay. You mean I can write anything? Yeah. Poem? I thought, yeah, okay, up to you. I'll make a list, up to you. So then I said, 15 minutes. My only condition is you write. And I will write with you. I will sit here right in the middle of the room and I'll write. Okay? And we will look at each other's work. So please don't, if you write a love letter to your partner, we are going to read it. Right? So please write. We're welcome. In fact, if anybody writes a love letter, we'll read it first. Yeah. And we wrote. At the end of the 15 minutes, I stopped, right? Then I said, okay, guys, so what did you think of the activity? At first, they were like, no, then the first thing they said was, it was very, very deeply unsettling. I was like, why is it unsettling? You didn't give us instructions. Look at your slide. It's just a picture of us of some cartoon writing. It's like, yeah, I read to you a text and I said, write. You came to a creative writing pedagogy class, right? And I asked you to write. And they were like, yeah, but where are the instructions? How can you do that? So therein lies the problem, right? When I give you complete freedom, you don't want it. I only asked for 15 minutes out of a 3-hour lesson. They didn't want it, And I explained that to them because we have very successfully created, and this is coming from a university that's really, well recognized across the world, right? We successfully created a lot of people who are very good at following instructions. The minute you gave them freedom, they did not know what to do with it. Okay, and they were very hesitant. And they wrote such beautiful pieces. I've done this every year for the last few years. And whenever I look at their text, they've written lovely things. The writing was coherent. Some are long, some are short. It all depends on how much you can write, isn't it? It's got nothing to do with it. But they write so well. But they are frightened about the whole idea of writing without guidance, because am I judging them? Are they allowed to talk about violence, for instance? Are they allowed to talk about alcohol, for instance? A very, very heartening moment was when one of my students who wrote a text in the first lesson, right, a story about his father, in fact, giving him beer to drink when he was 4 years old or something. The father the father was quite abusive. That story went on to get to win the London short story competition because the student continued writing. He said, "You mean I'm allowed to write this?" I said, "Yeah. You don't have to say it's a true story or anything. You just write what comes to your mind. It's a good story, and you built it up carefully. You are not talking about something for just the sake of presenting the work, right?" So. And he said, I would have never done this otherwise. I only did it because you said I could write whatever I could, and I thought I'll write about this. And I'm quite surprised at the reaction my classmates have. So starting off by, I've already jumped through this, yeah. So starting off by creating an environment where the where the writers are given a fair bit of agency, right? Results in them creating texts that are far more creative. At the same time, remember in the beginning of my slide, I talked about the fact that your beliefs are shaped by your two other things as well. One is your background, your experience, your own experience in a writing classroom. And this cuts across all subjects, right? What you think is a good piece of text based on what you experienced when you were younger, and also your peers. I hope I expanded on that earlier on. Yes, your professional development. Whether you are given space and time to step away and write a teacher who writes and come back, you know, whether you're able to do that and whether you are your environment, the teaching environment that you're in, allows you and encourages you to write. So someone said that, you know, if I'm writing these stories instead of writing research papers, I don't think they will like it. I was like, who won't like it? You know, you do things for yourself, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys have hobbies. And I'm just saying, set aside one hobby that also develops you as a writer, develops you. It's not just passing the exams and going out and being, you know, being in a place where you instruct someone else to do something. It's about ensuring that you are empathetic to the person right in front of you, whom you are instructing, and getting into the pool with them when they're swimming. It allows divergent thinking. It allows you to become far more adaptive. Okay. Oh, I do want to share this this part. The whole idea, the whole notion of writing teachers need to be writers themselves. For it to be effective, it's nothing new. It's something that was established in the US in 1971. So in 1971, they established an institute, and we've established one in Singapore as well a couple of years ago, as a, you know, a charter. They must have been researching on this at least a good 5-10 years before that, right? 1971, you establish a program institute, and across the world, teachers have been trained there. So since 1960s, at least, I would say people have been looking into it and thinking about it and thinking, wondering why is it that we have a whole group of people who perform so well, let's say, for instance, in the English language exams, but they are not able to write a coherent and a convincing argument outside of the classroom. There is something happening here, you know, that we're getting. So that was the reason they said, you know, the people delivering the content, they need certain things for them to be able to do so effectively. Oh yeah, we set up our institute in 2014. So I have 10 minutes. Okay, very quickly. So one of the things that I do, that's with my postgrad class, right? So one of the things I do with my undergraduates, so I teach and share, and I develop the module on writing pedagogy. So the group of undergraduates that we have at our university, they're all sponsored by the government. So in Singapore, with teacher education, the Ministry of Education interviews the candidates after their grades 12 or after their degree. You know, we have two groups who come in. Sometimes they go off and do their degrees overseas and they come back. So they interview them and they hire them, right? They send them out to the schools to teach for a couple of months just to see whether you like being in a school setting, right? Because it's one thing to think that it's noble to teach. It's another when they put you in a school setting, and a teacher has a very. I say this to my son as well, and when I tell him I don't think teaching is for him, because a teacher has a specific trait. You know, we function in very chaotic environments. A task starts, then someone interrupts you, then something. You know, so you must multitask. 3 people are talking to you at the same time. The student talks to you. There's someone telling you something in the office. A colleague is telling you something, and there's now with WhatsApp, my God, I hardly answer my WhatsApp messages. Now then there's WhatsApp coming through, there's emails coming through. When I hear the sound of my email come through, my heart already goes like, oh, I've got to answer that email because it's official. There's so many things happening, and you have to deliver the curriculum. You have to deliver the syllabus. You have to make sure that they are able to learn and function and perform, because you know they must do well as well. And on top of this, now you've got this whole team coming in and telling you they got to enjoy what they're doing somehow, and you got to enjoy what you're doing. You got to show them that you know how to do what they're doing, right? So in that context, so the undergrads who come to us are already hired by the ministry, and I'm teaching them how to teach writing. In a high school setting. Okay, this module. So what I did was, they're all expected to write. The first 15 minutes in my class, I read to them because they've come in blank otherwise, right? I'm going to get love letters or sad poems. So otherwise, they're all very young, you know, teenagers that come in. So I read to them. I read different texts to them every week, and they always stop and say, I thought this was a pedagogy class, applied linguistics class. It's not a literature class. And I go, So you don't read. You're going to be an English teacher, but you don't read. Come and sit. So we start. Nowadays we take turns. I read to them. I take about 10 minutes. I read some parts, something that AG. It really depends on what I want, what I feel like that day. They write for 15 minutes. So that's a journaling. And they create, then we go on to talk. I get them to do activities according to the theories and all. And then I give them the theory. Okay, but the whole idea is experiential learning. It's a 13-week module, yeah? And the idea of When you look at writing, it's the reader, writer, text. Three components that's very, very important. And all three needs to be engaged. And it was very, very sorry, I'm going to skip this. It was very heartening at one point, several years later. This was 2020. The student wrote to me and said, "So this is the COVID times, right? This was my student, and he's given me permission to share his image. He went into a school that had lower income earners as well. He didn't go into one of those schools where a lot of parents were quite wealthy. He went to an ordinary school." And he said, he got them to do this activity. He said, "I remembered what you did. So I got my students to do this. I got them to write every day." And at first they didn't want to write. And then some of them started writing. And I, to encourage them, I took all the stories, I typed it out, because I'm handwriting it, I put it together and I published it. And in his own money, right? He paid for publishing and he gave it to them. And apparently they were thrilled. He said now 3 of his students wanted to be writers themselves, right? And he said he didn't make it compulsory, but because of that, they started reading. Because of that, they started reading and they started experimenting with different forms. Another teacher talked about reading a story to her class, and she was reading chapter by chapter. It was teaching in a special needs school, right? And then came the holidays, and they got really upset because they were not going to hear the end of the story. So she ended up buying a whole lot of books, for all the kids to take home. She told them to go to the library, but they were nervous. And then she got, but the fact is, and they read. And when the holidays ended, the students read and they had written stuff about it. And this was some of the things that we did in our classes. We did the immersion program as well, where we make sure that, okay, same concept as swimming, right? So you want to teach them writing, I get them to go meet actual writers who have done this successfully. I get writers to come into my class. I get them to go and visit book launches, and I get them to talk to writers. And the way the people who actually do this for a living talk about it is so different. They talk about it with a lot of joy. The way my students think about it is they think about it as something that I have to do. So unless they are completely immersed and they have exposure way beyond the classroom, it's not going to change what they knew, what they think, what they had experienced before. Just delivering the syllabus and getting them to deliver the syllabus doesn't work, right, in its own. And at the heart of this whole design was just a simple shift in stance from teacher of writing to a teacher who writes. And it's been very slow, mind you. And I'm also curious to know how effective it's been in the US, because I don't think it's possible for everyone to become famous writers, right? Yeah, so to actually publish writing, but people are trying. People are doing their own little things, little texts. And this is all way before AI has taken over and things are generated. And that generation of text takes away, of course, your ability to process. I'm just by following the syllabus and getting a distinction in your English language exam doesn't prepare you from being able to write effectively later on. What more if you were using ChatGPT to produce everything? Yeah. So some thoughts I want to leave you with is agency emerges through, of course, a teacher's choice and the classroom culture. And the challenge before us is not to protect writing from disruption. And disruption, I'm referring to the tools, but to ensure that disruption deepens learning, voice, and agency. And we are at the cusp of it because it's arrived. It's just arrived 2 years ago, and things have changed tremendously. And people are so dependent on it, even to answer a question I asked in the classroom. Wednesday night, I had a PhD class that I was teaching. Asked a very simple question that came from their own experience they needed to answer. And right in front of me, the student was sitting here, wasn't even hiding, right? Because they all have their laptops open, because we do a lot of writing online and all. And the tables are, the classroom setting it's all circles, right? And the screens are across the room. We have screens all over. And so I don't stand in one place. I'm walking around the room. And I saw her Googling the answer on ChatGPT, and I go and there's no attempt to hide what she was doing. Sometimes the questions they ask me, I've delivered something and I delivered lesson away in the middle of lesson and I get a question and go, okay, that's a good question, but that's really not relevant to what I just talked about. And I'm trying to figure out, this is not the usual language this person, because I know my kids, right? It's not the usual language this person uses. And then here I am, diligently trying to answer the question, and only for it to hit me that, oh, it's a ChatGPT question, right? So I don't know whom I'm teaching anymore. I'm teaching ChatGPT, and I think I'm a student of ChatGPT as well right now. But having said that, I don't have the answer to that. I'm certainly something that I'm going to research on. It'll take me about at least 2 years to get back with data, concrete data, and by then I hope my data doesn't get old because it's really moving so rapidly. It's like the tiger's tail you hold on to. I want to leave you with a few reflection questions, not for you to respond to anything, but just for you to think about. What I presented to you was a 2-3 year study, right? Of multiple components, multiple teachers, multiple students, multiple classrooms. We looked at a national level, and I've had what I did for you is just a basic little, showing you all these different themes, and I did only a little bit of everything. Yeah. How do teaching practices shape students' relationship with writing? Does it shape? How do we, think about your own experiences? Where might we allow more space for voice, experimentation, and ownership? Ownership means not creating something someone else did, not reproducing what your teacher tells you. And I have 2 minutes. Yes, not reproducing what your teacher tells you, but and not ChatGPT, but things that you write on your own, you craft on your own. The fact that you are able to articulate an argument on your own, right? And how can we thoughtfully integrate emerging technologies into writing pedagogy? I certainly am not of the school of thought of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I certainly think AI tools are here to stay. Let us learn how to work with it. Let us find a way to work with it and not just revert completely, go 20 years back into, education and then say, let's only do exams. There must be a way we can work around this, recognizing that there are weaknesses. Now, after all, after so many years of education and review of syllabus and sharing internationally and learning from one another, there are still gaps. You saw with my data, there are still gaps. So it may not be a perfect system, but we've got to start somewhere. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your extensive and insightful keynote address that highlights the importance of creative writing and that gives us a space to identify our own voice through the style of writing. Thank you once again, ma'am. Where insights settle, perspectives unfold, it is now time for the question and answer session. You're all most welcome to put forth your questions to Dr. Anita, ma'am.
Thank you. And I must say, her ability to quickly synthesize some of the things I have said, that you will lose if you check on ChatGPT. That's what it is. That's the thinking you need. Amazing. Thank you. What's your name? Nandini, brilliant. You are what we need more of. Yeah. Questions, guys? I may not know the answer, so it's okay. I'll try. What did I give? That question was for you. How can we thoughtfully integrate, is it? I don't have an answer yet, but I certainly, what I have done so far is I've certainly not said don't use it. So the university doesn't, in principle, the university allows you to use it to get started on, like, let's say, research or topic, etc., right? And you have to declare that there's ethical use. You have to declare that I've used AI tools, for instance, ChatGPT, to respond to this assignment and what you have used it for. You have to declare that when you submit your assignments. So NTU now is, I think, number one in AI learning, right? I mean, we're investing a fair bit of our resources and our time into embracing it. We, as an institution, we haven't said no. There are a lot of faculty members who have said no. Absolutely not. You cannot use any AI tool to generate a response. I haven't done that. What I did in my class, so with the creative writing class, I tell them, I get them to handwrite, right? So one of the things I've done, then I said, okay, put it into ChatGPT. Now tell ChatGPT to rewrite your story. Like you just, and they typed it out. They were not even typing it out accurately. Okay, coming from a generation where we were taught how to type on a typewriter as well as a computer, it was like mortifying. With all those mistakes they typed, and ChatGPT rewrote the whole thing for them. Okay, so then I said, fine, excellent. You've got a text, right? Now we will swap. We will swap these texts. Don't tell anyone which one was written by ChatGPT, which is written by you. We generated the text amongst the class. The ones written by the class, a human, right, were deemed to have been far more interesting. The one written by ChatGPT was deemed to have far more, was lexically dense. The lexical density was higher. Structural structures, the sentence structures were also far more complex. For instance, there was all these words that were common, so common, commonly appearing throughout all my class, all the stories. Certain vocabulary words were reappearing many times. But and there were two stories where the ChatGPT got the character wrong and the plot wrong from what the student had originally written. So I'm glad to see that there's a gap. But at this point in time, so that's what I did. So that's one strategy I did. I know a lot of students have used Grammarly and all, because we do have a huge international population at NTU. Right? And I don't know whether we just have equal population, but we have a huge international population, and not everyone is necessarily as fluent in the English language as equally fluent, right? So they use Grammarly, for instance, even when chatting, they use Grammarly to correct their language and all that. But though at that level, it hasn't been questioned whether you're using it to correct your language, your mistakes. For instance, someone said they didn't know the difference between prepositions, etc. So those were some of the things I've done. With my writing pedagogy class, because these AI tools create fabulous assessment rubrics, very, very thorough. But they don't always match the syllabus or the needs of the students or the context, right? Because it gives you a template. Look, it's been trained by some of the best models around the world, right? So it gives you a sort of a template, a starting point, but it needs a lot of modification. So I get them to sit down and assess the document. If I don't get them to assess what has been created by AI, they are assuming I can cut and paste and submit it to her, right? You may or may not get an A, right? But if only when they analyze it will they know where the shortcomings are. So once they could identify what the weaknesses with some of the rubrics that was created, then I told them, let's try it out, because we're also learning, right? And it's growing far more quickly than anything. So we put in, so you found out what the gaps were, and we put those in as a prompt, and then we asked it to regenerate. It still didn't get it. Then we needed to step in and modify things. So right now, teaching the students how to assess what is being produced as well seems to be something that is very important, because I think we need to also learn to live in a world where it's, where AI is going to be creating a lot of the things that we're going to be experiencing. So these are 2 or 3 examples of what I have done. I'm also learning. I'm not there yet. I was hoping to find out from you, the nation that produces the world's best computer engineers in the world, so that I can learn as well and incorporate it. Yes. And that's cheating. The question was to you. Yes. So I know I stand between you and lunch. Is it okay if I took just one question, after which, yes, your question, and after which I'm around, so I'll be happy to answer you off stage. Yes, go on.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. This is Kirti, research scholar, and my area of research is instructional design. I just have one question for you. What kind of teaching strategy can be adopted for higher education students to motivate them in creative writing? Because we know that AI has taken over. So can you just suggest some strategies?
To motivate them to write?
Yeah.
Oh,
Motivate them in creative writing. Because AI has taken over and creative writing actually is dying.
no, and the lovely thing, the good thing is, while AI is writing is good at creating a lot of things, right? Including research, etc., and helping you with literature review, research paper writing. Creative writing, my argument is it's not doing a good job. So that's what we discovered in the class as well. So when I showed them that it was making mistakes, for you put in, you write a story, you experiment with this, you write a story and you put it in, right? And then you ask it to expand on where you want it to expand. It's making mistakes with characters. It's
No,
making
actually, sorry, ma'am. I just want to know, like, without using AI, how can we help the students or motivate them to do creative writing?
how do I help them? How do I encourage them to do creative
Yeah,
writing
without using AI.
without using AI
Yeah.
at all?
Yes.
That's through the activities that we do in class. We do
Yeah.
things, you know, that
What
so
kind of activities?
like
can
one of the things is encouraging them to do free writing. You've got to read my textbook that's coming out next year. So one of the things we do is free writing. The other things is we do field trips. We ensure that they are submerged into the creative writing ecosystem. So they meet authors, they meet, they go for launches, they meet publishers, they are part of literary festivals. Then they are in touch with writers beyond just a one-off meeting. So they're part of the literary world. So it becomes like almost like a magical, land that was exclusive. So that kind of motivates them as well to keep writing. With creative writing, the thing is you need to keep them writing, right? Kiran Desai took 20 years, was it 20 years, 15 years to write the latest novel, right? It's about finding finding the motivation, being engaged, finding, telling yourself, I will write something, and writing from your own experience, because AI will be able to write anything but based on what AI knows, right? What AI has been trained in, but not your own experiences. You want to write with, as an Indian, when I write, I use Malayalam words as well in my writing. I write about Indians. I write about, and my father once said, if you don't, change all the names to English names, make it Americanized. It's like, you only write what you know, right? So I write about kiri parota and all that, like it's such a huge part of, courtship and all, so encouraging them to celebrate their own identity, encouraging them to celebrate their own experiences, their own knowledge, their culture, their language, integrating it. These things AI is not able to do effectively yet, thankfully. So these are the things I show them, and my writers are also very hesitant. I've got a lot of Chinese writers who say, I don't think the world wants to know about Nanking. My research scholar is from China, and she goes, I said, of course they want to know about Nanking, right? How many of you write in English language as the first text? Of course they want to know what's going on in China. Tell us about the food, So yeah, look at Amy Tan. She's been so successful. Yeah. So that's what I do so far. Can I take so what do I do? Do I take the question? Okay, so one last question, yes.
Hi, ma'am. That was a great presentation. Finally, I found a person who is working on my area. I'm also working in a similar space. So my question is, I believe in distributed cognition. So we have to work along with the AI. So my question is, in terms of idea generation, what do you think about the students from your space is generating new ideas? Because I believe that AI could bring a lot of information. It is a repository. If I talk with a person, he has a sort of knowledge that gives a small amount of information, but the AI could pull a lot of information around the world and repository. So in terms of idea generation, what do you think of it, and how it creates another dimension of bringing out the ideas in terms of creative writing, and also the feedback quality, how it differs from the instructor in the class?
Sorry, I didn't hear a second, and also the
Feedback quality it gives, how it effectively gives than a human instructor in the class.
So you need to train AI to give you the feedback that you're looking for. So you need to give it already sample, feedback the sort of feedback you want, because and then it gets trained. It's not necessarily giving you the sort of feedback you need. And okay, so that's one part. But the first part was sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question? Yes, I had the answer in mind and then I lost it.
It's about the idea generation.
Idea generation, okay, hang on. So idea generation, right? When it comes to the pedagogy class, I mean, so, the teachers, you're looking for different ideas on how to teach a class because you have an idea in mind. The syllabus has one idea, a broad idea, and then it generates different ways and activities you can do. I don't see anything wrong in that because I think at least it's very efficient. But what we need to do is to teach the person using this to be able to assess whether this is useful. So one example is, let's say I want to teach a class of 14-year-olds how to write a procedural text, and I have an image of, okay, I'm going to teach them how to make, no, ice cream is primary school. Like, I'm going to teach them how to make soup in the kitchen, and then I'm going to teach them how to do the procedural text, right? I only have one thought about this. Okay, it has to be food. I'm thinking soup because it's easiest to make. You just throw everything. I don't want them cutting too many things in the kitchen, and then it's an English lesson, also a cooking lesson. So I've got all this in mind, and I put all this in, and AI is likely to give me several options. And I say, give me 3 choices. It's how I train it, right? Give me 3 choices. It gives me 3 choices on how this lesson could go. I need to teach my teacher how to assess which one of this will be the best for your classroom. And so the sort of teaching which we never used to do in the past, that I need to do. I can talk to you after this too. I see Dr. Arigason coming forward. Okay, no. Okay, so that teaching part is very important, and I don't think we are there yet. So you've got to find educators who are doing explicitly thinking through each of these steps. Yeah, a lot of it is on the spot teaching, You can't take it as it is, right? So idea generation, I don't have an issue. I personally don't have an issue. I want it to, but out of all the ideas you get, you need to know which one to pick. And that is a skill that we haven't taught yet explicitly. We're just there.
Ma'am, you told me about the things that it generates. I believe that I've been working on it, but I found that a lot of words that are repetitive, it follows a certain pattern.
Yeah.
But it is in the nascent stage. We can easily find out what are the repetitive words, whether it is generated by AI or human. So that's one thing
I know. Then they also talk about the M dashes, right? But I used to write. So now anyone who uses dashes is using ChatGPT, and I go like, look at my Facebook post. I've always used dashes. This is way before AI came in. Some of us writing style includes dashes. So some of us will have certain words that we are far more fond of than others, right? So the danger is you cannot be in a position where you accuse someone who's genuinely writing a paper on their own of having used AI. One example is this is in my department. Yeah, we took Professor Hu Wang Wei, really, really, really prolific academic who's now moved to Hong Kong. And his paper was on assessment or something, and we put it through the software, Turnitin software, to see. And it came out as it was generated by AI. This paper was written 10 years ago, right? Because it was so well written. It is sophisticated language, and so for some reason, AI now thinks that none of us can write. So anything that's written at a high level is generated as something that is created by them. Maybe it's time to beat them at their game. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. I'm open to discussion, but let's go send the rest of the world off to lunch. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for patiently listening to all the questions and answering and elaborating on the ideas that you just shared. A special thanks to ma'am for being so considerate of our lunch break. So we now indeed break for lunch. Kindly help yourselves. The lunch has been arranged outside the hall, after which we shall move forward with the parallel paper presentation sessions. I request all the paper presenters to kindly listen carefully to the venues of the paper presentations that I'll be announcing right now. The first session would be session E, which is chaired by Dr. J. Mangai Karasi, Dean of Academic Affairs and Head, Etiraj College, will be happening in this very same venue, Hippocrates Hall, Medical College. Session F, which is chaired by Dr. Abe Pungudi, Assistant Professor, SRM IST. The session will be happening at Demo Hall, which is to the left of me and to the right of you in the same floor. Session G will be chaired by Dr. Yatsumeni, and the venue is in UB, University Building on 11th floor. room number 1107, Taiwan Study Center. And finally, session H, which is chaired by Dr. D. Alice, Assistant Professor, SRM IST, will be happening at the same university building on 11th floor, room number 1106, Japanese Center. We request other paper presenters to kindly proceed to their respective venues at 1:40 p.m. sharp after having their lunch. We also invite all of you to join us for the valedictory ceremony sharply at 3 p.m. in the same venue. Thank you so much.